Good afternoon, everyone. We'll call the Stratford City Council meeting to order. We'll begin this afternoon's meeting with a moment of silent reflection. Thank you. Joining me here in the council chamber is City Clerk Tatiana Defoe, Deputy Clerk Chris Bantock, and our Chief Administrative Officer Joan Thompson, as well as a number of directors and staff members online. This is International Women's Day, and we celebrate all women within our community and on our council for their contributions to not only our community and our families, but also to our businesses, our organizations, and of course, civic and national governments. So thank you so much for the difference they make. Is there any declarations of peculiar interest this afternoon? Seeing none, I'll turn the meeting over to the clerk.
Through your worship, item 3 is adoption of the minutes, and there is a motion that the minutes of the regular meeting dated February 22nd, 2021, and the special meeting dated February 23rd, 2021, of Council of the Corporation of the City of Stratford be adopted as printed.
Moved by Councillor Beattie and second by Councillor Ingram. Discussion? If not, all those in favor? Opposed to any? And it's carried.
Item 4 is adoption of the addendum, and there's no addendum to be adopted to today's meeting. So move on to item 5, report of the Committee of the Whole in camera session. And item 5.1 is from the February 22nd session under the Municipal Act as amended. And the following item was considered, which is an appointment of a Stratford Area Builders Association alternate representative to fill a midterm vacancy on the Heritage Stratford Committee. And there is a staff recommendation that Jack M. West be appointed to the Heritage Stratford Committee to fill the vacancy of the alternate SABA representative for the remainder of the 2-year term to November 14th, 2022, or until a successor is appointed by council.
Moved by Councillor Ingram, seconded by Councillor Burback, that Mr. West be appointed. Discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed to any? That's carried. Thank you.
Item 5.2, just prior to today's regular council meeting, an in-camera session was held to consider the following items: a matter related to proposed or pending acquisition or disposal by land by municipality or local board, a second matter related to proposed or pending acquisition or disposal of land by municipality, and there was an additional item related to advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege. And at the in-camera session, direction was given on the 2 matters related to the proposed or pending acquisition or disposal of land. Moving on to item 6, hearings of deputations and presentations. Item 6.1 is a request to waive penalty and interest on 2021 tax installments. And there is a presentation by Georgia Steele. So the first motion listed on the agenda is that the presentation by Georgia Steele regarding a request for relief from residential property tax penalties be heard. And that the online petition titled COVID Relief for Stratford Tax Penalties be received.
Moved by Councillor Clifford, second by Councillor Vasilakos, that Ms. Steele be heard. All those in favor? Opposed to any? That's carried. The clerk will now open the room for Ms. Steele.
Good afternoon, everyone, and happy International Women's Day. Thank you very much for having me here and allowing me to speak. I can't hear anything, so I'm just assuming you can all hear me okay. Is that, can you let me know if you can hear me? Okay, good. So I don't know if everybody's had a chance to see the letter that I sent in and or the petition that is on change.org. I know it's not the usual accepted format, but as I mentioned in my letter, we're not living in usual times, as we all know. I believe it's fairly well understood that everybody's hurting. The government of Canada has certainly acknowledged that, and the various branches of government have acknowledged that by all of the relief efforts that have been put forward. I think, a year into this pandemic, most of us have sought out whatever kind of relief we could find in an effort to take care of ourselves and be fiscally responsible for our various, financial pressures and responsibilities. Certainly any of us that own businesses I dare say even getting to the point where you can manage to own a property these days with the prices of properties requires a certain level of responsibility and the ability to try to prepare and keep your financial ducks in a row. So I do want to say one thing right out of the gate, and that is that it just seems to me that, if we're going to be penalized if we're a little late paying our property taxes, that it seems like a pecuniary conflict of interest to me. And that's just something, I don't know if others will agree with me on that, but it's also a catch-22. Most of us have been put out of work not because it's been our choice. I certainly think of myself as a hardworking person. I've run a business for 30 years. I've never been in this position before. It's humbling to have to rob Peter to pay Paul and figure out how you're going to pay all the bills. And to ask for help itself is humbling. I'm sure I'm not the only one that feels that way. I do believe the other petitioners would agree with me when I say that we would like to think that council would care about how we feel and about the fact that we need help and we're asking for help, and that it's humbling for us to have to ask for help. And I think the mayor also would appreciate, that it has taken an effort to try and do this and ask for this. It would have been nice if it wasn't necessary to ask, if there was some sort of a COVID relief plan in effect. There may be for other things, but penalties for late property tax payments just seem punitive to me at a time like this. I understand in general that they're there for a reason. They're there to encourage people to pay promptly and so on. This is normal for there to be penalties in place when people don't do things the way things are expected to be done. But these are not normal times once again. So it's a conflict of interest to set things up so that we cannot work. Social gatherings have been shut down, venues have been shut down, restaurants have been shut down, businesses have been shut down. I don't have any way to generate income because of these things. I'm a hard worker. I want to be working. So, and I will scramble to make my payments for my property taxes, indeed. But if it's a little difficult during these difficult times, I would expect those that represent me and utilize my tax-paying dollars to have some empathy and some compassion and some understanding about the pragmatics of the situation. That's what I would ask of you. And I think that my fellow petitioners have some feelings along those same lines. Otherwise, they wouldn't have made the effort to sign the petition. And it takes a bit of effort. It's easy to scroll by, roll your eyes and go, oh, yeah, whatever. But people have made the effort. Over 181 people have made the effort. And some of them have put in comments about how they feel. There's no doubt about the fact that people are struggling. So that's not really in question. What's in question is what is Stratford going to do about it? I am happy to pay my taxes. I'm happy to participate in the running of this town. We're a community. We're a democracy. It takes all of us working together to keep things running smoothly. And I have no problem with playing my part. But if I'm struggling momentarily because of this situation, I would expect that council, my representatives, the people that represent me and the other citizens of this town would have some compassion for the ordinary, everyday working individual, and certainly the sandwiched middle class, right? That's what I would hope for. And I'm not asking for the moon. I'm only asking for what other townships and communities have done. And every single other township in the vicinity has done something for their citizens. Stratford offered 1 month only. Why is that? Could we have at least 3 months of relief? Could we have a break in the interest rate? I just think there has to be some acknowledgement. We need to know that you care about us because we make the effort to vote for you. And we don't complain about paying our taxes most of the time, but we want to know that you're hearing us. So I think most of the rest of what I wanted to say is in the letter that I sent in, and I don't want to bore you all by repeating everything. I know I only have 10 minutes and I don't have my timer on, so I don't know how much of that time I've used up. But I just want to say on International Women's Day that it's great to be a woman. It's great to be a woman entrepreneur or someone who runs my own business and has, you know, been the head of my family and, you know, paid to keep things going. And, you know, I managed to buy my own house and I did all of these things and I'm working hard and I just don't want to be thrown under the bus. I just want to be given a fair shake, and I just don't want punitive penalties. And I also disagree with the idea of a pecuniary conflict of interest. If the government shuts us down and then punishes us because we have no way of making the money that we need to pay the bills that they are then going to penalize us for, that's a conflict of interest. So please consider what I'm saying and the other 181 citizens of this town and show us something, some gesture that you care about what we have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Steele. Councillor Clifford.
Yeah, I was going to ask, with the announcement that the province, and it was on transit, but is there any other help from either the province or feds to help with what we're talking about today?
Ms. Baroness, if she's on, or Ms. Thompson.
It's Janice. Are you referring to help to the municipalities or to individuals?
No, to the municipalities.
The only thing we've received is some additional Safe Restart money that was announced earlier this month. And that is for municipal operating pressures due to COVID-19. And it's about $453,000.
Councillor Ingram and Councillor Vasilakos.
Thank you. I have a question for Ms. Steele. I was not able to open the petition to be able to see who had signed it at all. So I'm wondering if you have a copy that you can provide to all of us. I think that might be helpful. I did read it and I did try to look at it, but I wasn't able to see who had participated in that. So is it possible for you to do so?
Absolutely. I don't know if I can do it right here and now in this moment. If somebody can help me figure out how to do that, I'm happy to, but it is right there online. So somebody's speaking. Councillor Ingram, are you speaking at the same time? I can't tell what's going on.
No, sorry, I wasn't speaking at the same time, but it doesn't have to be right now. Just if you could provide that to all of council, that would be helpful at some point. I think from what I could tell, I had to actually sign the petition to be able to see who was included in it. My second question for you, however, is if we were to proceed with having you pay your property taxes if available, and then having staff come back to us with a report denoting the number of people who were unable to pay, the penalties and the interest fees that would be incurred if you are not able to pay, and then we could deal with it retroactively. Does that sort of assist in some manner? I'm trying to gauge how many people are going to require this and the expense that it may create.
Oh, okay. I would be very receptive to your receptiveness. So if it's retroactively, that's fine. It's an acknowledgement of the need. So in my case, it would be much more manageable for me to pay the property tax itself that I owe, minus penalties and interest for whatever I'm behind, that I would be happy for that in whatever form that takes. And there's 181 signatures, but not every single one of those signatures is going to be a property owner in the exact same situation where they have penalties that they've incurred. So, but I will download that and I will make sure that it's sent, I guess, via the email I've been communicating on. I've been communicating with the city clerk.
Okay, that'd be great. Thank you. And I appreciate that response. I can't guarantee that anything would happen retroactively, but I can at least, you know, put forward a motion that we will look at it.
That would be wonderful. I'd be grateful, and I think my other petitioners would be as well.
Councillor Vasilakos.
So I had a question around the relief that we did give last year. It was for, if I recall, was it simply for 1 month, or was it the quarterly installment? So it was interest relief April through the end of August is what I seem to recall. So I thought that we gave interest relief for a similar period of time as some of the other municipalities around us, but I can't be sure. I'm just wondering if, I don't remember exactly the details of it, but if maybe the Director of Corporate Services could jog my memory.
Yes, through your worship. As soon as the pandemic really hit in March, we waived interest and penalty on the next available installment, which was April 2020. And that interest and penalty was waived until August 31st. So if they couldn't pay their April 2020 installment, there was no interest and penalty on that until September.
And for clarity, that April payment was quarterly. Was that on quarterly payments, or the people paying on monthly?
That was on quarterly payments. We had a few people paying monthly who asked us to stop their monthly payments until the end of August as well, which we did, and we reinstated them in September.
Oh, and they didn't incur a penalty either. So it did cover more than just a 1 month payment. It was a payment that ran from April through to the end of August, is the clarity that I want to say. In other words, the program or the relief that we provided last year when the pandemic started is similar to the communities that were around us. But maybe some people hadn't realized that at the time.
Yes, through your worship, it was for the second installment in April. And if you couldn't make that payment, there was no penalty and interest, and the payment didn't have to be made until September.
Okay, thank you.
Any other member of council having a question at this time? Is there a referral motion, Councillor Ingram?
Yes, so I will move the staff recommendation with a second component to it, that a report be presented back to council after the quarterly payment is due in April, denoting the number of properties that were unable to pay their taxes and the interest and penalties that will be incurred.
Is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor Clifford? Discussion? Councillor Seven?
Thank you. I'm just going to speak against the motion. I think the idea, I don't have a problem with the idea. I think the issue is my preference would be, I'm looking at option 2, which would be similar to the relief we provided last year. So waiving penalty and interest on the April installments for 2021 until the end of August. That would be my preference. And I guess just because, you know, I don't know the sort of sense of urgency of some of the families and households and businesses in the city. And I just, you know, we probably could have been on top of this before now. And I just don't want to delay things further.
Thank you. Councillor Clifford?
Thank you, Your Worship. I also had a call from businesses that have been closed, like they've been closed ever since last March. And they asked me to bring up if there's any relief if their businesses have been closed. I know in the past we had businesses that weren't operating had a tax break. So the individual asked me, was there anything that could help an individual in that case? So I'd ask our Director of Corporate Services, is there any help in that case?
Through your worship, not through the municipality. There could be some relief through their impact assessment if they've had reduced revenues in 2020. And there's also relief from upper levels of government.
Thank you. Councillor Burback.
Thank you. Yeah, I echo Councillor Sebin's sentiments. I would prefer that we go with option 2. I think that the motion on the floor is good, but it sort of postpones any help that people will be getting, and it seems like people need help in a more immediate fashion. So I will also be voting against the motion.
Thank you. Anything further? All right, the clerk, if you could read back the motion so we're sure, and then we'll call the question.
So through your worship, it's my understanding that the motion is that a waiver on tax penalty and interest not be initiated at this time, which is option 1 in the report, and that a report be presented to council following the next tax installment to identify the number of properties that were unable to make the full payment and to provide information on the penalty and interest incurred.
All right, Councillor Henderson, you had a question?
I have a question. So if we go forward with this option and it's determined it's maybe around the same as last year, will that be a lot of extra work for if it comes back to council and then we decide to waive it until the end of August, and then the clerks have to go and remove all that interest from all of the ones that weren't able to pay? I'm just wondering what's the best option here to not make a lot of work either for the clerk, for the Treasury Department.
Yes, through your worship, it certainly would be a lot of work to reverse all of the interest. It would be the preference to waive the April installment interest if that was your choice. As a note of interest to council, the February installment was just under $19 million. We collected 91.2% of that. And on the Monday following the due date, there was just under 1.7 million still outstanding. And some of that has since been paid as well. And that's not an unusual amount to be outstanding in any given year.
Councillor Vasilakos.
Yeah, so I was interested in sort of in the staff report, sort of highlighting that the amount of interest that was paid last year, or the penalty, was, you know, not unusual compared to other years. And I'm wondering whether there's a broader conversation on here that who may be struggling this year may be different than who was struggling last year, but that we always have a certain number of people that are struggling with those interest payments. They are high I mean, I'm sort of not against providing sort of one-time relief like we did last year on the April, and again one time on the April this year because of COVID. But I am wondering whether we could be looking at the interest that we're charging just every year, because what the director has just highlighted is that every year we have people that are struggling to make their payments, and then they're paying fairly high interest rates on that, and whether we should be looking at whether that interest rate is just generally too high from year to year, and whether it exceeds what it costs us to, you know, to have to carry that, or the staff time that it takes to sort of send out the bills again and things like that. So just sort of a broader discussion around when people can't pay, what that penalty looks like and what impact that has on their families, whether it's during COVID or otherwise.
Thank you. Councillor Ingram.
Yes, thank you. For our Director of Corporate Services, would the COVID funding that was the Safe Restart money just announced recently, would that cover the approximately less than $30,000 for the interest revenue if we were to waive the interest on the April tax installment?
Through your worship, that money can certainly cover that. That is for operating pressures due to COVID. So lost parking revenue, lost recreation revenue, and if we include lost interest on penalty and interest on taxes, certainly we have a shortfall there. That money can be used to cover that as well.
Thank you. So based on that response, then I will rescind my motion and I will move that we waive any interest and penalties on that April tax installment.
Okay, is there a seconder for that? Councillor Burback. Discussion on that motion. Councillor Henderson, then Councillor Seven.
So you're basically saying you want to go with option 2? Okay.
Councillor Seven.
I had the same question. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Is there anything further? Councillor Vasilakos.
Just, I don't know if this is like just an amendment to that, and maybe staff could come back to us on what the repercussion or what the impact would be of reducing interest rates just in general. I don't know whether that's a separate motion or we can include it here.
Councillor Ingram, you're okay with that as an amendment? The seconder is okay. Councillor Burback. Thank you. It's noted by the clerk. Councillor Gaffney.
I would prefer those to be separate because I'm going to vote against one of them.
Okay. So we'll separate the two of them, mover and second. All right, the clerk will call the question on approval of Councillor Clifford. I saw your hand.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, is it going to affect the interest on the taxes we've already paid or that's already been paid in February, whenever that was? Is it only on the April one?
Yes, through your worship, if the motion is only on the April installment, the interest will only be written off of that installment that's unpaid.
Okay. All right. It's been moved. Councillor Henderson.
I kind of thought Kathy was talking about the idea of us lowering the interest rate permanently, and it might not start till September or something, or were you just meeting just for this period?
Councillor Vasilakos, do you want to provide some?
If I may, I think that's going to be a separate motion now. My motion is just for staff to come back and let us know what that current interest rate. I view the interest rate as should be cost recovery as a fee, as opposed to being punitive on people who haven't paid it in general. And that is simply for staff to come back with a report at some point on what the impact is and what our costs are for trying to, you know, sort of track down unpaid on tax bills. And having a look at what that looks like and whether there's the option to reduce that. So it's not a decision on that. It's more coming back and looking at it. And it's been separated now anyways.
Okay. So I'll call the question then. All those in favor of option 2? Opposed, if any? That is carried. Second item is that staff review the interest rate charge on past due tax accounts. It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed, if any? And that's carried. Thank you.
Through your worship, turning back to your agenda, and item 6.2 is a delegation request from Jesse Votary representing Ramshackle Industries. And there's a motion that the presentation by Jesse Votary regarding patio options for Ramshackle Industries be heard.
Moved by Councillor Vasilakos and seconded by Councillor Ingram that Ms. Votary be heard. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? And that's carried. Good afternoon, Ms. Votary, and I believe the clerk is bringing you in.
Hello.
Hello, there we are.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Welcome.
Wonderful. I apologize. I had a technical error there. Thank you very much for having me here today. I believe that I'm hoping that you guys got kind of a package, a patio safety plan package in PDF format that was sent through the clerk. Is that something that you have?
Yes, we do. Thank you.
Perfect. So what I wanted to bring to council today, and I understand there actually might be a report coming from staff about this same kind of question or issue or consideration today as well. So I thought it might be timely to get notes in from my own perspective. So I am, of course, representing our 5 restaurants today who are all located on Wellington Street. I also have spoken to other restaurateurs, and specifically Chris Slotzhauer of AO Pasta has asked and has put forward his name as well, and said that that was something he wanted publicly, was fine for that. So it's not just us, but more in consideration of the angled parking spaces on Wellington and restaurants in the time of COVID. So what I'd like to do is I'd just like to kind of go over a few things very simply in the presentation you have in front of you. We kind of just did option 1, 2, and 3 obviously look very similar. The major differences there is just in the weight and substance of the concrete blocking that would provide safety. So we wanted to provide a number of different options so that if there was a kind of a grave concern in particular regarding safety, as you can see, they kind of go from the least heavy barriers up to the most, with the final option being, of course, one that is used on the 400 series highways to divide the 2 lanes of opposing sides of traffic. So quite substantial. All of them have a relatively similar footprint in that they're about 24 inches wide. The smallest option is our preference. And that is what we would like to have approved, but we're obviously willing to go up to something more substantial if safety concerns are there. I just wanted to put forward a couple of just kind of technical things about why I'm presenting this. I had spoken to council last year as well about this kind of same idea. There were the boardwalks being constructed last year. And I think that there was a lot of great consideration, and it was really great to see our city move. But I had put forward at that time that this was not kind of a one-size-fits-all solution, and that there were some other solutions perhaps that needed to be looked at. So just to do a little bit of kind of quick math, and I apologize, I didn't provide this in documentation, so feel free to ask me clarifying questions. But essentially, if you have 2 linear parking spots, let's use Ontario Street as kind of our main, obviously, place of patios being installed last year. 2 parking spaces are approximately 18 feet long each, for a total of 36 feet long. The sidewalk on Ontario Street is approximately 18 feet in width also, which gives you a patio for every 2 parking spaces taken up of approximately 648 square feet. The proposal this year of kind of $196 per parking space per month, assuming we're kind of I'm taking this as a 2-space kind of consideration. That's $392 per month, which divided by the 648 square feet of patio option availed to those who are on Ontario Street with linear parking, it's about 60 cents per square foot. When you move on to Wellington Street, obviously, because the angled parking adjusts the frontage, you're looking at about a 12-foot width on the sidewalk and about 12 feet per parking space, which of course reduces the square footage of your patio down to 288 square feet. This is the reason we did not move forward with patios last year, because the number of tables you can put in that spacing, with consideration, of course, for 6 feet between tables and all of the COVID restrictions required, is fairly small. As you can see in our layout that you have there, we can get 8 tables on 4 parking spots. Of course, our frontage is 2 buildings side by side, so we're hoping to be able to use 4. But even if you take that kind of mathematical equation, you take the 2 spaces, 288 square feet of patio at $392 a month, now you're paying $1.36 per square foot per month, which is a 226% increase in the cost for businesses fronting on angled parking versus linear parking. And I understand that life is not fair, but I think as a city we strive to be equitable and to provide equitable opportunities for our businesses. And as such, I'm hoping that the city will, and that you today will consider putting forward a motion and offering the option for businesses, particularly on Wellington Street, restaurants, of course, are the ones I'm focusing on, to be able to place their patio on the parking spots themselves and utilize the sidewalk itself as the pass-through. The AGCO has allowed for the travel of alcoholic beverages to cross an unlicensed area. That was obviously adjusted last year with COVID. And that is something that obviously allows us to put this kind of presentation together and ask for this accommodation.
Thank you, Ms. Votary. Councillor Henderson.
I have a question about how would you make the patio section accessible if you have it in the parking spot? Like how they set it up last year, they made it all accessible because the tables were on the sidewalk and the boardwalk still kept it accessible because you could come right off the sidewalk, go through the boardwalk and off again. But if you have it down in the parking lot, now you have the curb and so how do you make that accessible?
So in our Heritage Downtown, many of even the front doors of many restaurants are not accessible. And there's a great company, I think it's actually located in Stratford or certainly in the area, called Stopgap. Stopgap builds basically accessible ramps. And so in our layout, you see there's kind of an entrance and an exit with an extended distance on both sides. And that would provide for ramps to be placed at the height of the curb on a gentle slope that would get people down into the patio area, as it were, and then a ramp again at the exit point, both of them with consideration for both ambulatory and wheelchair accessible access.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Any other member of council have a question? Councilor Burback.
Thank you. Yeah, just while we're discussing Wellington Street, we did have someone send us some information or request about Wellington Street becoming a one-way street for the summer. And I'm just wondering your opinion on that idea and whether it would affect or help enhance or detract from what you're suggesting here.
Absolutely. I mean, if that is something we can address, I would absolutely add that. I mean, if you're interested in making that a motion today, I would even add that. I think Wellington being one way is a very good idea. Actually, Chris Slotzhauer, who I mentioned with Aopasta, is the one I think who maybe originally voiced that interest. I'm not sure if he's the one that put it to council. The reality is that if you were to make Wellington one way, you could essentially turn all of the angled parking spaces on the right-hand side into a promenade, a pedestrian access area that was patios and could be extended, outdoor tables for the retail shops. And then you could still, utilizing one of the lanes of traffic, you could still have kind of angled parking. It just would be shifted out further into that lane. And then the other lane would become a single way, which would then give you a really beautiful kind of access point because, to be honest, I mean, I'm on Wellington quite a bit, and I think the majority of traffic flows from Downey Street down through to the LCBO. So I think that limiting it to a one-way slows things down and makes it a lot more accessible. We do see a lot of, curbside pickup happening at the restaurants and shops down that way. So people would still be able to drive in. They would still be able to park, but all of that kind of initial parking would be able to be bumped out and created as a pedestrian area. I think that's a great idea.
Great, thank you for that. The other thing that I thought of was that something called tactical urbanism was suggested by Destination Stratford, and that might be an area that we could also look at putting in a temporary bike lane.
Absolutely. I mean, I think there's a lot. The flow also, if you come down from Downey on Wellington and turn around to Marketplace and then back up, Downey gives you a perfect triangle and doesn't really limit access to any of the shops that are there. The potential to, even leave it two ways at the very bottom beyond Marketplace that comes up to Lundy's Lane, so people could just, pop into the Remax or the optical design from the bottom would be possible also, but just with a concrete barrier that stops that second access point at a certain point. I think there's a lot to be done in Wellington. I mean, I would be for closing the whole thing down and bringing the slow food market back I'm very much a supporter of pedestrian areas.
Okay, thank you.
Further. All right. There's nothing else on this topic. Well, thanks, Ms. Votery. Oh, sorry, Ms. Councillor Burback.
Yeah, I'm just not sure when the correct time for me to make a motion to look at Wellington Street becoming one way, if that would be now or when we look at the pop-up patio report.
Why don't we do it with the patio report, and then we can put it all into context of a series of changes if we could.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anything further? If not, thank you, Ms. Votery. Madam Clerk.
So for your worship, turning back to your agenda, item 6.3 is a delegation request, and there is a motion that Mike Sullivan, on behalf of Get Concerned Stratford, be heard regarding the notice of motion requesting that council adopt a motion to ask the minister to rescind the ministerial zoning order on the annexed land.
Move Councillor Henderson, second by Councillor Burback. Mr. Sullivan be heard. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. Mr. Sullivan.
Thank you very much, and happy International Women's Day. I won't be long. Your worship and councillors, thank you for permitting me to speak with you on behalf of Get Concerned Stratford on this matter. As you are aware, the Minister's Zoning Order, or MZO, is a very controversial and highly politically charged issue at the moment with the provincial government. However, in the instant case, the Minister was clearly acting at the request of this council and has deflected all complaints about his use of MZOs back onto the council. The citizens of the city of Stratford expressed serious concern about the secrecy, but ultimately about the enormity of the project in relation to the city. Enormity in terms of the greenhouse gas emissions, enormity of the water uses, enormity of the project itself, which would have been the single largest development in and around Stratford by a wide margin. Citizens were also concerned about the hidden corporate structure of the company, the close ties to the government of China, and the vague or misleading answers to direct questions about the factory and its emissions. The decision by Xinyi to withdraw from Stratford means that the MZO, which was specifically for a float glass factory and emergency preparedness center, is now of no use. It is therefore appropriate that Council withdraw this MZO request. Industrial land inventory, consumption rate, projected needs, along with anticipated industrial categories to be pursued, can then be discussed in an open and transparent process. It would also be a necessary step to restore public confidence. We in Get Concerned Stratford have been assured by our MPP, Randy Pettipies, that if Council requests that the MZO be revoked, the Minister will act to rescind the MZO. We in Get Concerned Stratford and the citizens we speak with will all breathe easier if we know that Council has acted to ask to rescind the MZO. If you have any questions, I'd be pleased to answer them. Thank you.
Any questions for Mr. Sullivan? All right. If not, thank you, Mr. Sullivan. We appreciate your time today.
Thank you very much.
Clerk.
Through your worship, item 7 is orders of the day, and item 7.1 is a resolution regarding the task force update, and there is a staff recommendation that the task force update and long-term recovery planning report be received for information.
By Councillor Gaffney, seconded by Councillor Burback. Discussion? Councillor Ingram.
Thank you. So I had previously had the opportunity to read the report and had provided comments back in January, which I believe were circulated to Invest Stratford through the BIA as well as Destination Stratford. And I want to thank the volunteers who were included in the task force for their time and their effort as we navigated the pandemic. But I do believe it's time for a wholesale change in the volunteers that have served on this task force. And I think what we have heard is both through last summer and then through a couple of presentations that we had today, and then a couple of other, emails and phone calls and comments that all members of council have been receiving, that we need some fresh eyes. We need some new ideas, because that one size fits all proposal that, certainly for the patio boardwalk project that came through last year didn't fit many of the businesses that we have in Stratford. And I think keeping it fresh and bringing in the inclusion of business owners who have not yet been included, and allowing them the opportunity to volunteer, because we do have a very progressive city with a number of business owners who have some really great ideas, would be number one, meeting our goals and intent of inclusion and diversity, as well as providing that ability to progress this entire project through the second phase of the pandemic. So I would like to move that we do request that a wholesale change of the volunteers on the task force. I'm not sure how to say this. That we advertise and open up the positions on the task force within the next couple of weeks, publicly advertise it, ask all of the organizations that are involved to, promote the task force and promote these positions on the task force so that we get new people involved. And then also at the same time, thank all of the existing volunteers for their service on the task force.
Seconder for that, Councillor Burback. So is it your intent, Councillor Ingram, to not allow any of the existing people to reapply, or are you wanting them all to go? And do you have new terms of reference with regards to this?
So I would like all of those, the applications to come back to council so that we can see that there has been a turnover. And if we do not fulfill, or if we do not receive applications for any of these positions or interested parties for these positions, then certainly the people that are serving could continue on. But I think the ability to provide, having the opportunity to have new people involved in some fresh ideas and some fresh eyes would be a good idea.
Great. So I think your motion would be more appropriate, that you'd like the clerk's office to take over the organization and setup of the task force, and to advertise for new members, and bring back a plan at the March 22nd meeting that council could approve so they could head out for applications.
Thank you.
Okay, seconder for that, Councillor Vasilakos. Discussion. Councillor Clifford, Councillor Henderson, Councillor Burback, and then Councillor Vasilakos.
Yeah, I also agree. I agree that the people that were on the task force did a great job. So I'm not positive about this, if it's a slap in the face or what. But regardless, who's going to be in charge of the task force if we go the route we're talking about?
Councillor Ingram, did you have a thought on who would manage the task force?
So I think the staff that are involved from all of the different organizations would provide that continuity and that stability on the task force, and they would still continue on in their roles. So I don't see that changing. I think bringing in new people and providing the opportunity for new people to be involved is a good idea, and I think we should promote that.
Thank you. Councillor Henderson.
I just have concerns about, I know on some of our committees of council, what we do is, different, like say energy and environment, for example, we have different terms of years so that you don't have a complete new committee and people not knowing the history or whatever they did. So I can see opening up, say, maybe half the positions and maybe one year, 1 2 year type thing, so that you don't lose all the excellent volunteers we've had, but still open it up if there's other people that, like we see the applications and then we, approve who's going to be there type thing. I just don't see open it up the whole committee, because you lose all that talent.
Ms. Defoe.
So through your worship, it was my understanding there was previously a motion already on the floor, which was the staff recommendation that the task force update and long-term recovery planning report be received for information. Is it possible to call the question on that motion first? Then we can return to the motion currently made by Councillor Ingram. And then I would also just inquire if the CEO of Invest Stratford has any comments, as this is a committee that was led by Invest Stratford and it was not, in fact, a city committee.
Okay, you have a mover and a seconder for item 7.1. Thank you. All those in favor of the motion? That's carried. Thank you. We'll go back to debating the motion that was put forward by Councillor Councillor Ingram. Councillor Burback, I had you next.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's a good idea to get some fresh eyes. So maybe this is a question as much as a comment. So we've got the task force, which has a steering committee. So the steering committee would still have the similar members. So there would be expertise and people that would be providing leadership. We're talking about turnover in the volunteers or people that could bring ideas from various different sectors. So I don't think it would be a total wiping out of what we had. It's just bringing in some new, fresh eyes. And along those lines, we did get some communication from Stratford Arts and Culture Collective. And I really do think it's important that we include them in this, first of all, in the task force, but also moving forward. One of the things that I noticed in the review, the literature review, is a recommendation for a cultural subcommittee of some sort. I'm not quite sure if a subcommittee is maybe the right language for it. Maybe it's an advisory committee. And I was looking a little bit into that. Many communities do have a cultural committee, but steering that committee normally is a municipal cultural plan. A lot of municipalities have a municipal cultural plan, and I do think that's a big gap in what we have as far as planning goes. So I think this would also be a really great time to look at the creation of a municipal cultural plan, which maybe I could bring up as a separate motion, that we look into creating that at the same time, because some of the people that are represented by the Stratford Arts and Cultural Collective really are doing an amazing job throughout the pandemic with continuing on with what they're doing, with providing live entertainment and so on. And I think it would really make a great partnership, but also if we had a cultural plan that sort of expanded us out beyond the usual festival and gallery and museum, that it would be of real benefit to Stratford in our economy, especially bringing in local tourism. I know that a lot of the smaller arts organizations bring in people from Perth County, from Huron County and so on, and that's a large sector that's, I think, seems to get overlooked. So perhaps once we've finished discussing Councillor Ingram's motion, I'd like to make a motion about a municipal cultural plan being created.
Great. Councillor Vasilakos, and I saw Councillor Sebin, then Beatty.
So I like, so originally when the task force was, it was put together, we were sort of in that acute crisis mode. We didn't exactly know where the pandemic was going. We didn't have really a lot of, it was, really new. A lot of the people that maybe are ready now to participate and want to sit on it and volunteer, or maybe just trying to figure out how they were going to actually, just keep afloat at the time. And so I think as we move from that sort of acute phase task force kind of activities to something that is more like around what that long-term recovery planning report, it is a good time to stop and sort of say, what's in that report? What are the kinds of people we need around the table? How do we then go out and recruit some more people that can help with those parts of it? So I think it is a really good time to switch the task force from being something ad hoc and not really necessarily sure about where we were going with the pandemic early on, to something that could be more long-term with more of a terms of reference, maybe more reflective on the expertise sort of centered on that report. So I think it is a good idea to go out and look and see who else maybe wants to participate, and then have council review the applicants with the lens of the report that was done for the task force.
Yeah, so I think it basically comes back to the clerk's office organizing. Yep. Okay, so Councillor Sabin Beatty and then Gaffney in that order.
Thank you. I was wondering, just Ms. Defoe's point, would we be able to hear from Ms. Gerber? And I'm just also wondering if it is even in council's sort of, I don't know, jurisdiction to sort of mandate this. I do have comments and questions afterwards, but I was wondering when we could hear from Ms. Gerber on that.
Sure, Ms. Gerber.
Thank you. So through your worship, I appreciate the acknowledgement of the time of the volunteers, because those who volunteer. And many of the people that you see on your lists are people whose names and faces you see often in this community volunteering. So I appreciate that being highlighted. Many of the recommendations in the report you're reviewing and discussing now do speak to various voices to be heard in an organization or on a committee like this. So young people, ensuring that we're not driving a larger gap between those who have and those who have less. So, from a volunteer perspective, I think there are a couple of things. I'm very proud of the work we did. And part of the value of having a task force like this or a structure like this and an external board is it gives us the flexibility of applying to organizations like FedDev for $1.15 million, of which you would not have had to do any of the things we've done if it had been a city-led committee or within the city governance structure. And I'll defer to Ms. Defoe on how all of that would work. So I caution a little bit here, just in terms of making sure that we have a good set of tasks, if you will, for new volunteers before we go out and broad scope. I want to make the most of our volunteers. I want them to feel as though they are making a difference and making an effort, and that their time is being used in a very valuable way. So, I would look forward to perhaps Councillor Ingham and I can have a discussion about what exactly is missing and who is missing. And then, if we're going to put this through the clerk's office and have council approve or not of the volunteers, that becomes a council and city-led initiative. That's no longer an external board sort of committee of volunteers. So we're going to have to think through the structure with respect to that. And the other thing I would acknowledge is the terms and conditions of their volunteerism, if you will, and what exactly the objectives and the outcomes for the task force would be. I will say we have some backbone already set up here, in that you'll recall a year ago, Invest Stratford set up a button on our website to allow for community feedback. So that is still live and that could still be used. This was an excellent way to bring light to the fact that those whom in the community are looking to volunteer should and engage. And you can use that button as a way to receive that feedback from interested candidates. But I would just like a little bit of clarity and direction as to exactly how council sees this moving into, we'll call it Task Force 2.0.
Thank you. Councillor Sabin, did you have something else you want to add after that?
Yeah, if I could just follow up. So thank you, Ms. Gerber, for that. I guess my initial response is that I don't support the motion. I certainly think as long as the task force is open to, more volunteers perhaps joining if people are looking to help out, and open to feedback from the public to sort of help look at ways that didn't work for everybody. I just think that perhaps it would really slow things down if we shift gears so much at this stage in the game and sort of move things into the city realm more. And I'm worried that, we're all hopeful that this is sort of the final stretch, but we're already in pretty well the middle of March, and I would just hate to see, I think things have been going overall well given all the circumstances, and and everyone's doing a really good job. So I would hate to see that disrupted. It hasn't really been that long, so So maybe at this point, when things are really just starting to get into their stride, I'd be apprehensive to see that disrupted. So I don't support the motion as it is.
Thank you, Councillor Beatty.
Thank you, Your Worship. So one, never to have the desire to follow up with Ms. Gerber, as she spoke very eloquently and summarized my thoughts quite well. I'll just say that I too had heard many great comments from what this committee has done this past year to step up and support our community through this past year. I think it's nothing but praises for what they were able to do. And again, I too think to change these horses in midstream isn't the best option. So I won't be supporting the motion either.
I believe Councillor Gaffney, you were next.
Thank you, Your Worship. I was going to ask what Cody asked, but I also have some curiosity on it and some comment. In September, we're going to be 70% vaccinated. Shortly after that, we're going to be herd immune, I suspect. This is the last year of the requirement of the task force. Why we would want to disrupt the operations of the task force when I see light at the end of the tunnel. This time next year, I hope, knock on wood, things are going to be back to normal. And we can have conversations about how the city's going to move forward under normal circumstances instead of the special circumstances we find ourselves operating in last year and this year. So to make it, if it isn't clear, I'm not supporting this direction. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone further? All right, Ms. Defoe, if you could read back the motion that's on the floor.
So through your worship, it is my understanding that the motion presently on the floor is that the clerk's office for the city of Stratford complete the recruitment for volunteers serving on the task force committee members, and that a report be presented at the March 22nd regular council meeting regarding this process and any additional amendments to be required. Looking to the mover and seconder just to confirm that last piece.
Councillor Ingram. So mover and the seconder was Councillor Burbank.
It was Councillor Vasilakos, I believe. Yeah.
All right, the mover and seconder agree to that. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? And that's defeated. Could we have a motion that Invest Stratford take a call for, ask them to take a call for new volunteers and to expand opportunities for new board members? Councillor Beatty and Councillor Clifford, discussion? If not, all those in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. Councillor Burbank, you had one other item there you wanted to bring forward?
Yes, thank you. Just a little bit more information about municipal cultural plan. I was looking at some other municipalities, and actually the the town of St. Mary's has a really great cultural plan. It's on their website. And so I'm just going to take this definition that they had right from there so that we have a better understanding of what it is. A cultural plan translates the cultural needs and identity of a community into a tool for implementing recommendations. These recommendations seek to address gaps in cultural service delivery, expand participation, broaden the impact of culture, identify new opportunities, and stake out civil identity through cultural expression. A cultural plan is launched to address distinct objectives specific to the cultural sector of a town or city, including arts and heritage, creative industries, and resource providers. A cultural plan outlines a broad framework for the role of culture in civic life. So with that, I just thought it'd maybe give everybody a better idea of what a cultural plan is. I know that there has also been some suggestion that Stratford move towards some more economic development along cultural lines in, like, for instance, the film industry. And a cultural plan would encompass that type of economic development idea as well. So my motion is that we would have staff investigate putting together a municipal cultural plan and what that would entail.
Seconder for that is Councillor Vasilakos. Discussion. Councillor Ingram.
So generally, these types of plans require a cultural specialist, a cultural planning specialist, and we do not have one on staff. I don't think we have any staff member that actually could complete this type of plan. And so I'm wondering where the funding would come from and whether we would be going out for an RFP for this type of work. I know the SACC has done some work related to this, but I have those questions.
Councillor Clifford, then Councillor Seven.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea, but I wonder if it could be referred to the 2022 budget. So we have a plan and we have the finances for it. But I think it's a great idea. I think it's when you go to AMO, they talk about it a lot, and I think it's time for Stratford to have something like this. But if we could plan it properly, I'd be happier.
If I could suggest, next year in January, we start our official plan update, and the cultural plan could tuck into that type of collaborative process. I know Councillor Ingram is shaking her head no, but there is public consultation that would go on at the same time, and we could try to dovetail some of the public consultation and feedback so that we're not in a repetitive cycle where we do one before the other or vice versa. And I know Councillor Ingram has a lot of planning experience, but I also want to make sure that if we're going to go out on some of these, that we don't over consult on some and then people are not interested in consulting on others. So Councillor Ingram, after Councillor, I think Sebin and Gaffney had their hand, then by all means, I'd love to hear your rebuttal.
Thank you. I agree with Councillor Clifford, and I just would like to add sort of to that. If we could have an idea, I just want to make sure that we're not duplicating anything when that does come up. So just sort of if there's anything that's doing some of that work already, that we could be aware of that at the time when it's for budget discussions, that'd be great.
Councillor Gaffney.
Thank you, Your Worship. I was just wondering, I was just going to throw out there, is that this the sort of thing where once we get a report from staff, would this be the sort of thing we might strike an advisory committee to start off, inviting some of those interested parties and discussing their ideas and stuff? So it's just something I want to throw out there. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ingram, did you have anything you want to add? Okay. Councillor Vasilakos.
Just to Councillor Gaffney's point, I think really what you need to get a specialist who comes in and then decides what kind of focus groups, and so I think bringing in people before we have that consultant that has an idea of what questions to ask and has a chance to do that sort of overview of the cultural community. I think it could be putting the cart before the horse. I think that's what you hire as a consultant specialist for, is to lay out what that consultation process looks like, and they will make sure that everybody who should be at the table and is consulted is consulted. So I like the idea of referring it to the budget and knowing exactly what the work is that's going to be done, and scope the work really carefully and make sure that if we do it right and we do it well.
Okay. Councillor Seven.
Can I just have clarification on the motion, and if the piece about the 2022 budget is part of that motion?
Ms. Defoe.
Through you, Your Worship, presently the motion that has been moved by Councillor Burback and seconded by Councillor Vasilakos is that that staff investigate the development of a municipal cultural plan and what that would entail. However, the mover and seconder could amend the motion that it be referred to the 2022, the development of a municipal cultural plan be referred to the 2022 budget.
Yeah, I'd be willing to amend the motion to that, as long as it, so does that mean we would get a report with maybe some estimates on what we think it's going to cost, so that when we're going into the 2022 budget, that we'll have an idea of what the scope is and what it will cost?
Yes. Councillor Vasilakos?
I think adding the referral just does the same thing as the original motion. It just gives you a time of when it's going to come back to you. So I'm okay with that.
Okay. Anything further? Motion then? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. Thank you.
For your worship, item 7.2 is a resolution regarding the patio boardwalk project, and there is a staff recommendation that city-owned picnic tables be provided free of charge to restaurants outside the core from May 1st to October 31st in 2021, that the 2021 patio permit and license fee be waived, that the businesses using patio boardwalks be assessed a fee of $196 per month per parking space for a period of 6 months from May 1st to October 31st, and a flat fee for delivery, installation, disassembly, and pickup not to exceed $800 per boardwalk, and that the 2021 patio season applications open March 22nd, 2021 to ensure all businesses are able to prepare for patios to open May 1st, 2021. And I would note that the CEO of Invest Stratford is available to answer any questions related to this report.
Councillor Ingram moving that, seconded by Councillor Gaffney. So is there a mover for the resolutions on the floor? Councillor Gaffney, seconder. Councillor Beatty, then I believe Councillor Ingram had her hand, then Councillor Vasilakos.
Yeah, thank you. So I've heard from a number of businesses, specifically along Wellington Street, who would like to have patios, but feel that because of the angled parking versus the parallel parking, they are being unfairly charged for the installation of any potential boardwalks. The same goes for along Marketplace, because they are perpendicular parking spaces versus parallel parking spaces. And so therefore they're unfairly charged for the installation because it does take up more parking spaces. And so I'm wondering if there is the opportunity for a graduated fee based on the size of the installation. And I know that it is not to exceed $800 per boardwalk, but there, you know, I've heard from a couple of businesses, including, you know, some of the businesses that have already been mentioned during our meeting today, that the monthly fee for these parking spaces, that they're trying to expand their restaurants to be able to increase their business opportunities, are unreasonable in terms of what they can afford for their businesses. So for instance, when you have a business that can have 2 parking spaces, but the ability to use a boardwalk because they're parallel parking spaces. So for instance, along Ontario Street, they can use parking spaces. They have the boardwalk. They can fit, you know, 10 to 12 tables within their patio space. If you go to Marketplace or Wellington Street, those 2 parking spaces can only fit maybe 4 tables versus the 10 to 12 that you're getting on Ontario Street. And so there's an unfair advantage that is playing out in terms of where they're located and the types of parking spaces that they have available to be able to use for patios. So that's issue number 1. And I do suggest maybe a graduated fee. The other issue is that we have received correspondence from retail businesses that are adjacent to patios, and patio lineups, the boardwalk installation that takes people away from their retail window displays. They're causing some harm to those retail businesses because they're, you know, some of those retail businesses pay a premium based on their location to be able to display things in the windows, and these boardwalk installations are taking the foot traffic away from those windows that they're paying the premium for. So I think we need to really consider some sort of enforcement or some sort of alternative plan to say, you know, there can't be any lineups to get into these restaurant businesses that obstruct retail window displays. and that, you know, the flow of traffic needs to be able to, the foot traffic going past these restaurants and through these boardwalks need to be able to accommodate the retail spaces, and we can't just be focusing on the ability to have patios for the restaurants.
Councillor Gaffney.
Thank you, Your Worship. This motion we're dealing with, and I may be misunderstanding something, is the boardwalk stuff, right? It's not the pop-up.
The pop-up patio is the next item.
Yeah, that's Wellington Street. I would wonder if an alternative to, just based on what Councillor Ingram just said, an alternative to this whole thing is to not do it at all. If that's the sort of response we're getting from some of the, and I know I've heard from retailers that they're concerned about the number of parking spots that they're losing, that their customers may use to come into their retail establishment. So, you know, if boardwalks have become such a hassle for others, then an alternative is to look at not doing boardwalks and pop-up patios at all this year. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Clifford.
Yeah, I was going to say, and I understand what the presentation, if parking isn't horizontal, if we had half price for the ones on Arcot Square and Ellington, I would support that. And I know it's an expense, but it's also when we don't have the parking, it's an expense to the city of Stratford. So I would support if the ones up on Ontario Street paid what we suggested, but on Market Square and Ellington, it was half the amount per parking spot.
Councillor Henderson and Councillor Gaffney.
Don't forget Downey Street, because Downey Street should be included like Ontario because they have the parallel parking.
Right.
And there's also York Street. No, not York Street. George Street. Because they have, and they've got the parallel parking too. So maybe it should be parallel versus perpendicular versus parallel parking. Maybe it should just be spelled out what rates would be for each type of parking space.
Councillor Gaffney.
If that was a motion, I will second it. But I want to ask through you, Your Worship, the Director of Finance, that we have some contingency money from the grants department. So we will have, I think we have some resources to help out where we can. So thank you.
Miss, if I could, Councillor Burback, I'm just going to ask Miss Baroness or Miss Thompson. There was an amount in the budget for a number of initiatives. So if we could just identify that amount where funding like this would come from, Councillor Miss Thompson.
Through your worship, yes, the treasurer did identify during the 2021 budget that there would be that there was funds in this year's budget for some of these exemptions. So the bed and breakfast licensing fees, those sorts of fees. So this is included in the budget. I believe it's $50,000, but I would like to get clarification and come back to you.
Okay, I believe I saw another hand kind of go up. Councillor Burback, thank you.
Thank you. I do think that the pop-up patios and these boardwalks are quite well received, are quite popular. So, but I did have somebody ask me yesterday about retailers, and let's say a retailer decided they would like to have some sort of extension of a similar nature. Would we be willing to extend a program like that, or maybe somehow otherwise modified, just because is there a way that we can reach out to help retailers that might want to do something a little bit different or have a little bit of space on a sidewalk. It may not be a patio set up in the exact same way, but I think we do need to be considering that other businesses might want to have some sort of patio or extension of the space in front of their business as well.
Councillor Vasilakos.
So I am interested in seeing what a graduated or different amounts in parking depending on the kind of parking that and the patio. I think that it makes a lot of sense. I mean, again, it's about fairness to the different businesses and where they happen to be situated and what kind of parking is available in front to be used for extended space. So I'd be interested in that. And just to Councillor Burbach's, once we deal with the boardwalk and patios, I think there is a motion to be made about asking staff to look at things that can be done in the downtown core around, weekend road closures or Friday night, midnight madness, or, there's different communities last year that actually thought of some, novel ways to get retail out into their downtown core, but it involved a little bit more of like Friday nights or Friday and Saturday nights and some road closures in the evening, things like that. But I think that would be separate from the thing that we're dealing with right now.
Anyone else? Councillor Ingram.
Thank you. And I just wanted to piggyback on the previous comments from Councillor Vasilakos. Some of those ideas were all brought forward through the BIA to the task force last year. So they're not, I don't think they're new ideas. I think they should probably be on the list of things to do. There was an art crawl. There was all sorts of other retail potential opportunities. So hopefully they're already on the task force list of ideas and things to do.
All right. Ms. Defoe, do you want to read back the motion that you currently have before you on the floor?
So through you, Your Worship, it's my understanding that the motion on the floor is the staff recommendation currently on your agenda, that city-owned picnic tables be provided free of charge to restaurants outside the core from May 1st to October 31st, that the 2021 patio permit and license fees be waived, the businesses using patio boardwalks be assessed a fee of $196 per month per parking space for a period of 6 months, and a flat fee for delivery, installation, disassembly, and pickup, and that the 2021 patio season applications open March 22nd to ensure all businesses are able to prepare for patios to open May 1st, 2021. And that was moved by Councillor Gaffney and seconded by Councillor Beatty.
All right, Councillor Vasilakos.
Would there be a possibility of a friendly amendment on the part of the mover and the seconder to have staff do a graduated pricing system for the different kinds of parking?
If I could suggest, maybe the easiest thing to do would be to approve in principle everything so that people can start to apply, and ask staff to report back on various models with regards to it, so we could approve that on the 22nd. That way people can start to make their plans in place. And then we're not, they can look at various options.
Makes sense.
So is there any further question on the motion that's printed? Councillor Henderson and Councillor Ingram.
Well, I have a question on that. I think we could approve, say, staff recommendation down to the waive part, and then that paragraph where it says that the business using patio boards be assessed a fee of, and maybe put staff will report back what the cost. Because we don't want to have that cost in there, because it might not be what it ends up being, and that the last section could start. Or we could say at a graduated cost that will be reported back with staff at a later meeting. But I think that paragraph needs to be deleted how it is.
So Councillor Henderson, the hope would be that if the staff recommendation was moved, that's the worst case scenario. And that the second be that we refer back. But if you'd like to ask the mover and seconder to strike the financial implications of paragraph 3, subject to a further report on March 22nd, that would probably be the best way to deal with it. So Councillor Gaffney is the mover. would you strike the financial implications subject to staff reporting back?
Well, my concern would be people start applying, not having any idea how much it's going to cost. At least I think that if we leave that number there, it gives the people downtown a chance to do a bit of budgeting. But to tell them that we may charge $100 or we may charge $1,000, but this way at least they know there's a number. Some of them may be told when they apply that there might be some adjustments at a later date, but ask people to go in blind, I don't know if that's fair.
Thank you. Councilor Burback?
I did have an idea that might make it simpler. If we took that line and said the fee of $196 per month per parallel parking space, that would define it as that's what the price is going to be for parallel parking. And then we can come back with the angled parking and perpendicular parking being different, because that will be probably the cost for the parallel spots. I'm looking for different pricing on the different types of spots. Is that correct?
Councilor Gaffney?
I wouldn't assume that'd be the number we'd end up on parallel parking either. There might be a different suggestion that comes forward on even for the parallel parking. You know, so again, I agree with his worship. Let's get a report. We can finalize the numbers for all. Thank you.
Councilor Ingram?
So I just like a bit of clarification on which part of the motion is in principle. Is the entire thing in principle, or is it just paragraph 3 that's in principle?
I would say the paragraph 3 is in principle. We're agreeing to the rest of it. Council, and then, sorry, do you have anything further, Councilor Ingram? Councilor Seven.
Thank you. I was just wondering, so is it anticipated that a lot of these will be sent out or notice will be sent out to many business owners before the report's back to council? Like to the extent where we should put in there somewhere or in the notice that the price is probably going to change, or is it something that we're possibly that many people won't be aware of the application until we have the price set? I'm just wondering how that will work, or if we should be worried about many people seeing the wrong price or
Councilor, or sorry, I'll let Ms. Defoe walk us through how this process works.
So through your worship, it would be our intent that should this motion be approved and the motion regarding the pop-up patio alternatives be approved, staff would then provide a number of communications out to our local businesses in the downtown core, including information on the guidelines that our deputy clerk has developed. We would then have them review the guidelines, respond to any questions, and then they could begin planning for the type of patio they'd like to pursue. As noted, the recommendation is that businesses be permitted to apply for a standard patio and a boardwalk, or a standard and pop-up. And for some, unfortunately, it may just be a standard depending on their locations. So with that being said, we could definitely indicate that the fees are still subject to approval by council while they start planning for the development of a potential patio concept to be submitted to staff for March 22nd.
Councilor Seven.
Okay, thank you for that. And I guess just my only concern without sort of letting them know the prices will change is that they might see the price and then just say, you know, write it off and say that's too much money right off the hop. So that would be great if they're aware that things will change. Thank you.
Anyone further? All right, all those in favor of the motion? Opposed? And that's carried. And then a referral motion by Councillor Vasilakos to refer the financial implications back for possible graduated system. Councillor Ingram will second. Discussion. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Councillor Ingram.
Thank you. And can I also put forward a motion that the patio plans be reviewed in terms of blocking retail window space for any locations that are adjacent to patios?
Yes, thank you. Mr. Foe.
Through your worship, if we could just seek clarification, is it on the patio itself, the patio and the boardwalk, or just the boardwalk? Because those have two very different impacts when completing a review.
I would say all of the above. If it's blocking the retail window display area of an adjacent business, I think it blocks it, whether it's a patio or a boardwalk or a combination of either one.
Thanks, Councillor Vasilakos.
And if I could add, it isn't just patios on neighboring window displays. We have also seen some issues where lineups outside of stores then even retail stores will then start to impact adjacent businesses. And I think what we need is some kind of direction to downtown businesses that whatever activities they have, whether it's their patio or whether it's their lineup or whether it's their COVID, any of their protocols, that they have to be really mindful about the impacts it has on their adjacent businesses. And that and there were a number of instances downtown over the last year where some businesses were finding the lineups were sort of going across their window fronts and things like that. So it's not just the patios. So I think that's where if we're going to do it, let's just do all of it.
Ms. Thompson.
Yes, thank you. Through you, your worship. Was also wondering, as part of this review back to staff, that we request staff to also review the existing policy on use of municipal property boulevards and sidewalks, because it does cover the downtown. So that policy is P.3.3, and perhaps it would be a good time to review that policy as part of this work that staff will be doing.
Thank you. So that verbiage will be included. Councillor Seven.
Thank you. I was just wondering if I could have clarity if something like this is already taken into account when the boardwalk or patio are applied for, just with the adjacent businesses.
Mr. Bantock or Ms. Defoe.
So through your worship, in 2020, when the patio program was unveiled, we did restrict the patio to the area in front of the restaurant. However, because the boardwalks then become the sidewalk, it did cause some issues where the sidewalk had to extend beyond the actual restaurant just because of existing infrastructure like trees and whatnot. We did our best to communicate to businesses to ensure there were no lineups. However, there's only so much information that we can provide to businesses. With that being said, we can take all of this information back. We can review it. There may be, in order to resolve this, it may be that the patios end up getting reduced in size. So it will definitely be necessary for a report to come back so that council is aware of all of the implications and what our limited scope may be. But we can certainly complete a review and come back to council.
Thank you.
Anyone further? Ms. Defoe, do you want to summarize what is being referred to staff?
So through your worship, it is my understanding that the motion currently on the floor, moved by Councillor Ingram and seconded by Councillor Vasilakos, is that the patio plans be reviewed in terms of their effect on neighboring businesses, including a review of lineups and potential direction and communication to be provided to businesses, and that a review of the existing policy P.3.3 be completed as part of this. I will note that the policy review may take a bit longer than the review of the patio plan, so it may come back to you in two parts, just for your information.
Thank you. Councillor Vasilakos.
If I may, the review, it isn't only the patios? Because what I'm thinking is some shops are putting out those little, like it is some retail shops that have lineups to get into them that are impacting their neighboring businesses as well. So it's not only just the patios, it's also so if we could just say restaurant patios and retail COVID lineup, plans, that would be helpful.
Thank you. Anything further? It has been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. Thank you.
Through your worship, moving on to item 7.3, which is a resolution regarding the 2021 patio applications pop-up patio alternative. There is a staff recommendation that the report titled 2021 patio applications pop-up patio alternative be received for information.
Moved by Councillor Bunting and seconded by Councillor Burback. Discussion. If not, all those in favor? Oh, sorry, Councillor Clifford.
Yeah, if I could have a clarification, if it's like, is it what we're talking about on Wellington Street as far as the presentation we had earlier?
So through your worship, yes, that is correct. So instead of having a boardwalk in the parking spaces, which would act as a sidewalk, the sidewalk would remain open for pedestrian traffic, and then the patio would be physically located in the parking spaces.
Councillor Clifford.
Yeah, I was just going to add, if that's something council is in favor of it, do we have to report back? Like, I know we got the cement barriers and costs and stuff, but if like, as far as like timing on this, would it help if council was in favor of this, that we approved it today? I'm asking that out of curiosity and timeline to help the people.
Thank you.
So through your worship, with respect to our current business license bylaw, we are interpreting adjacent to a restaurant to include the parking spaces that would be across from the street. So at this time, this is just for information. We would be proceeding to open up this pop-up patio alternative option starting March 22nd. But if there are any feedback on the guidelines that have been presented, we would certainly be open to receiving that feedback.
Thank you. Councillor Burback.
Yeah, it's a question, I guess, about the concrete barriers that were suggested. So is it the intention then that staff would investigate, which kind of divider or concrete barrier or so on would be appropriate for each pop-up? Is that what's going to happen next?
Through your worship. So the pop-up patio guidelines currently contain fencing around the patio area that withstands, I believe it's 200 feet of horizontal force. The barriers on either side currently mention a wheel stop or other type of approved barrier. So that's something that staff would look at depending on how the application was presented.
Thank you. Councillor Vasilakos.
What I like about the guidelines is it gives businesses options in that we're setting specifications for what those barriers are supposed to withstand in terms of what we need for safety and insurance purposes. And then it's up to the businesses, I believe, to have an engineer sign off on what that looks like. So I think there's flexibility in it, which I appreciate in expanding it to like this, the pop-up. We set the specifications, the business comes up with the plan that meets those specifications, and that allows more flexibility, but then it also puts the onus on the businesses to come up with a plan that suits what we need. So I like the idea of it, and I like the guidelines based on that.
Councillor Henderson and Councillor Burback.
So the idea that Jesse brought forward, or any other idea like that, I'm assuming, but I want to clarify this. Would they be responsible for that themselves? And do they need some would they need any, they wouldn't need an engineering report, right? They just need staff saying, this is where you can put them and not, but that would be at their expense.
Through your worship, that's correct. The pop-up patios as currently prepared would be at the expense of the business. Applications that are submitted do require drawings that can be submitted by the applicant. However, staff have the opportunity to review and pending any discrepancies could request further submission.
Thank you. Anything further? Councillor Burback.
Yeah, it's not related to this motion, but once this motion is finished, I'd like to bring forward a motion about making, looking at the possibility of making Wellington a one-way street for the summer.
Councillor Ingram.
Thank you. I think from what we've heard, some of the restaurants in the area that would be able to host a pop-up are not financially able to complete a lot of the engineering requirements because that will be quite costly over and above the payment of the parking spaces and all of those other things. So I'd like to make sure that there is the opportunity extended to be able to request a waiver of some portion of these fees. They would incur fees that businesses a part of the boardwalk program would not incur. And I think that's an unfair advantage.
Councillor Gaffney.
Sorry, Your Worship, I hit the wrong button. And through you, before we start writing blank checks, we have to have an understanding of how much it's going to start costing us, I would think, if we just said, go ahead, send us the bill. That's my concern on that. Thank you.
Councillor Ingram.
Thank you. And I agree with that comment, but again, we have, you know, we've talked about this a number of times as we've talked through these last three agenda items related to how we're trying to be equitable and trying to be fair, and we're not doing that. It's not achieving that when we're asking businesses to go out and pay for their own engineering because of their location and because of the type of program that they are able to comply with. And so, you know, if we want our businesses to be successful and we want our downtown to remain vibrant, we have to afford some sort of ability to these businesses during the pandemic to be on equal footing with businesses that had all of that paid for them during the last year in the patio extension boardwalk program, because it was covered through FedDev or some other sort of funding. And so to not be recognizing that gives an unfair competitive advantage to all of those other businesses based on location and ability to comply with the program.
Councillor Burback, then Councillor Henderson.
I was just wondering if there is money coming forward again this year from the FedDev, if we could earmark a portion of that to cover the costs in a similar fashion that we did with the boardwalk for these pop-ups.
There's not guaranteed money coming from FedDev. Last year, that money was a grant for another program that was asked by Invest Stratford to repurpose it for recovery efforts. Councillor Henderson, I saw your hand next.
Yes, for the pop-up, like similar to what Jesse brought and the idea about fencing and different stuff, would we need an engineer report for that, or wouldn't our staff be able to say, as long as you've enclosed this area? Like when people put out in the past before COVID, when people put out their little patios around their restaurants, did they have to have an engineering report or just apply for a permit?
Ms. Defoe or Ms. Thompson or Mr. Banta?
Through your worship. So as long as the business complies with the patio guidelines under the details required for the pop-up, then that's what staff would be reviewing when an application is submitted. And as it currently stands, an engineering report would not be required.
All right. Anything further? Any other questions? All right, Ms. Defoe, the motion on the floor, if you would like to read it back.
Through your worship, it's my understanding the motion on the floor moved by Councillor Bunting and seconded by Councillor Burback. No, I do not have that correct. My handwriting is atrocious. My sincerest apologies. All right. Oh, it is.
Yeah, it was so long ago, I forgot.
My apologies. Through your worship, the resolution on the floor is that moved by Councillor Bunting, seconded by Councillor Burback, that the report titled 2021 Patio Applications Pop-Up Patio Alternative be received for information.
Right. Anything further? Councillor Vasilakos and Councillor Henderson.
And for clarity, does that mean that staff will move ahead with the new patio guideline? Like, are we approving the patio pop-up alternative to be incorporated into the program this year? Or do we need a separate motion for that? I think that's what Councillor Clifford was getting at earlier.
So through your worship, this report was prepared just for information. It would be staff's intent to roll out the pop-up patio program, including the guidelines, and open up applications for March 22nd. So we do not need a motion to approve that at this time.
Anyone else have a question at this time? Councillor Henderson, you're fine. All right. All those in favor of the motion? Opposed, if any? That's carried. Thank you.
Through your worship, moving to item 7.4, which is correspondence regarding the AMO Annual General Meeting and Conference. The 2021 Association of Municipalities of Ontario Annual General Meeting and Conference is being held virtually on August 15th to 18th. Councillors interested in attending are asked to make arrangements with the CAO's office, and this is for the information of council. Moving on to item 7.5, which is a resolution regarding the Vivian Street Line 37 road widening, and there is a staff recommendation that the City of Stratford accept Part 4, Plan 44R-5803 as public highway and dedicate it as forming part of Vivian Street Line 37.
Moved by Councillor Ingram, second by Councillor Vasilakos. Discussion. Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried.
Item 7.6 is a resolution regarding the Ontario Street road widening, and there is a staff recommendation that the City of Stratford accept Part 1, Plan 44R-5820 as public highway and dedicate it as forming part of Ontario Street.
Moved by Councillor Ingram, second by Councillor Clifford. Discussion. Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried.
Item 7.7 is a resolution regarding the 2020 Statement of Council Remuneration and Expenses, and there's a staff recommendation that the report of the Director of Corporate Services dated March 8th regarding the 2020 Statement of Council Remuneration and Expenses be received for information.
Moved by Councillor Councillor Bunting and Councillor Burback. Discussion. Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried.
Item 7.8 is a resolution regarding the 2020 status update on the multi-year accessibility plan, and there is a staff recommendation that the 2020 status update be received and uploaded to the city's website.
Councillor Henderson moving, seconded by Councillor Burback. Discussion. Councillor Ingram.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions related to this. Does the city have a TTY phone number for hearing or speech impaired folks? That it's not listed on the city's website, and page 9 of the report mentions phone upgrades, so I'm just curious.
So through your worship, it is my understanding the city previously had a TTY phone. However, it was removed as many persons with hearing impairments have their own technology which permits them to call into the city, and they prefer to use that technology.
Okay, thank you. And so my next point is sidewalk snow removal and the ability to maneuver during the winter has been an ongoing discussion lately, partly related to some of the changes that we're making in the school zones. But it has been brought up related to people with mobility issues as well. And so I'm wondering if there is a way to increase the ability for those with mobility issues to get around and outside in their neighborhoods during the winter. And you know, I know we've dealt with this a number of times, but given that we're working on the school plan, I'm wondering, starting maybe next November, next December, if there is the ability to work with schools to have, you know, a parent shoveling group through their parent council, or if there is the ability to provide memos in with the tax bills that go out later in the fall, just to remind people that, you know, people with mobility issues would like to be able to get around the neighborhood as well. And could you please shovel your sidewalk and assist the city of Stratford? Because I think a lot of people rely on our sidewalk snow clearing and forget that, you know, it doesn't happen overnight many times, and that people with sidewalks in front or adjacent to their properties, shoveling those properties would be helpful. So I'm wondering if there's the ability to do, you know, a couple of those things to increase the mobility for people in the winter.
Councillor Henderson.
Thank you, Danielle, for bringing those two great points up. I'm just wondering, I don't know if it was Kathy, or do you know if the Snow Angels are still active in Stratford? There was a group that, you know, you could call their number or send them an email and they'd come out and help you. Do you know if that's still going on?
The website is still up and running, but I don't know that it had a lot of uptake. But part and parcel with that Snow Angels program was a communication campaign that got sent out every year about how to improve accessibility on the sidewalks, in terms of the plows can only do so much. Then maybe people could go and, you know, you need to hand shovel to get it down to bare. There was a whole sort of piece to that used to be shared every fall. And I think that speaks to what Councillor Ingram was saying. Maybe we can, you know, pull out some of that old information, and it included, you know, tips on shoveling, and it included some information on how many sidewalks the city has, and it was just, so I'm wondering whether we can sort of just bring that back and do a little bit more using that. As I said, the Snow Angels program is available. The library was helping people sign up for it. I just don't know that it actually, we didn't get the uptake that we thought we would after trying to promote it for years.
Anything further? The motion on the floor is the recommendation under 7.8, correct, Ms. Defoe? It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? It's carried. Anything further on that item? Thank you. Next item.
Through your worship, item 7.9 is a resolution regarding amendments to Schedule 1, prohibited stopping on specified streets, and Schedule 2, prohibited parking on specified streets of the city's traffic and parking bylaw 159-2008. So as noted on your agenda, there are a number of amendments that I won't read in full, but for the members watching, the first part is that the traffic and parking bylaw Schedule 1, prohibited stopping on specified streets, be amended to extend no parking restrictions to 10 a.m. as follows, and there is a chart included on the agenda. That Schedule 2, prohibited parking on specified streets, be amended to extend no parking restrictions to 10 a.m. as follows, as listed on the agenda, and that the restrictions in traffic and parking bylaw Schedule 1, prohibited stopping on specified streets, be deleted. And again, there is a chart on the agenda for members of the public to review.
Moved by Councillor Vasilakos and seconded by Councillor Gaffney. Discussion. Councillor Henderson.
I was just wondering why around some of the schools there's an extra time, like 11:30 to 1. Is that because some schools have students go home at lunch, or and the other schools the students stay all day?
Your worship, you know, it's historical what is there, and from staff, and these are older bylaws, and it's staff's opinion that they were established because of school at lunch times, if people were picking up, or if they had just morning kindergarten, those type of past activities. So what we presented here as staff today was something to address the morning issue, as noted in the report. When we start looking at each individual school, you may see more adjustments coming with expanding the zones, changing the times, adding more streets in and around the schools. But this was just to address an issue that we knew about right now because of school starting just after at 9:10. And so we did a quick fix to give us time to start dealing with each individual school.
Councillor Burback.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm just curious. So the time is changing from 8 to 9 to not 8 to 10. I'm wondering why we didn't go with 8 till 9:30, or is that a problem with the signs if you're putting stickers on? Or I'm just curious why the time was extended so much further past the beginning of school.
The chair, part of it was expediency and the stickers that we were going to put on, and because it just says 9 right now, so it's a little bit easier. It was just to get something done quickly. Again, if there's changes in the future, if it extends, we've covered off some of these times at these school areas.
Okay, thank you.
All right, anything further? It's been moved and seconded. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried.
So item 8, business which previous notice has been given. Item 8.1 is notice of motion from Councillor 7. And the motion is that council formally requests the minister to revoke/repeal the MZO that was issued.
Councillor 7 moving, seconder. Councillor Burback, discussion. Councillor 7.
Thank you. So first, I'd like to amend the motion, just the wording of the motion, if I could, just in consultation with the clerk. So I'd like it to be that staff submit a request on behalf of Stratford City Council to the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing to request the revocation or repeal of the ministerial zoning order, and then the regulation 356/20. If that's okay with the seconder, and then I just had a comment.
Thank you. Councillor Burback concurs, and the floor is yours, Councillor 7.
Thank you. So I brought this motion forward following the public announcement that Shinyi has indefinitely suspended their proposal. The development was not something I personally supported. With the MZO no longer in place, the lands would no longer be exclusively zoned for a glass manufacturing facility. So come what may in the future, with no MZO in place, any development would be subject to a public planning process that has gotten Stratford to where it is today. And if I could request a recorded vote, that'd be great.
Great. Thank you. Councillor Beattie.
So I think it comes as no surprise that our industrial available lands is quickly dwindling. I believe our CEO of Invest Stratford is still with us, and I would welcome her comment in regards to where we are currently as a city and our availability of industrial land. I think where I'm going with this is the fact that we have heard from our community, and I think that there is perhaps a compromise here in that I'm sure that everybody is well aware that this is something that wouldn't be used for many other things other than industrial land. So to revoke the MZO in its entirety, I wonder is the best strategy, and whether it's something that could be amended to industrial land. But I would welcome the comment from our CEO in regards to where we stand currently in terms of availability of industrial land.
I believe Ms. Gerber is joining us in here. Here we go.
So hello again, through your worship, the city's inventory of industrial land is, in the opinion of Invest Stratford, very low. You have, I don't have my numbers in front of me. I wasn't prepared to speak to this particular subject today, but my estimate would be about 35.5 available acres of city-owned industrial land serviced and available for sale. Based on our existing absorption rates, that is an 18-month to 36-month supply. And based on the time to service new lands, you will be at 0 in that timeline.
Thank you. Councillor Vasilakos.
So I understanding that we know that our industrial land is limited and we need to move on that. I think revoking MZO for a industry specific site that is furthest away from being contiguous with other industrial lands, and makes a lot of sense. And I think allowing Invest Stratford and staff to go back and look at the annex lands, look at how we would roll out industrial land and zoning throughout that, look at the servicing that would be required for all the different pieces, and the ones that are closest to our existing industrial land makes a lot of sense. So I think we can take a step back. We can ask for the revocation of the industry specific zoning in that southernmost piece, and we can go back and we can look at those annex lands and go through our regular process of zoning with a little bit more thought into the cost of servicing, how we expand servicing, where our other industrial land is, and put a bit more thought into that, rather than just asking the minister to zone a piece that is not currently serviced and is furthest away from all our other industrial land.
So you're proposing an amendment then to the motion that it be the heavy industrial designation from the property be revoked and that it be general industrial?
No, I don't think it makes any sense to use a ministerial zoning in order to zone that piece of property. I think it makes more sense to just revoke the existing MZO and revert back to our regular process where we take a look at all of that property and zone it in a more logical fashion in terms of what we have in terms of service. I don't think we should link the two. I think we should just revoke the MZO and then move on to our process of rolling out zoning in the annex land that makes.
Okay. So it froze a little bit there, so I think I've got the gist of it. So, Councillor Henderson.
I just want to be clear about the motion. So the motion would remove the section on the MZO where it was said it was for a glass float plant only, and also remove the industrial zoning change so that all the land would just be agricultural? Or is it just to remove the section that says for a glass float plant only?
The clerk, I'll let her understanding it is revocation of the entire zoning.
Through your worship, it's my understanding the request is to revoke the entirety of the MZO, looking to the mover, Councillor Seven.
That was my intention, to remove the MZO and then use our municipal zoning practice to zone the land.
Councillor Burback.
Yes, I agree with Councillor Seven, and I feel like MZOs should probably be used their original intention was in rural northern places where there isn't the municipal structure to have the regular planning process. And we have the ability to do a regular planning process. So I would much prefer to see the MZO be revoked and we just use our regular public planning process to proceed with any industrial development in those lands.
Councillor Clifford.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, I don't support the motion on the floor. I believe we should revoke the float glass plant part, but because of what our CEO of Invest Stratford and Councillor Beattie brought up, we are at a shortage of industrial land, and I think it's an opportunity if there is an opportunity to have a clean plant come to town, in contrast to what we had last time. I think it's an opportunity to speed up the process, so I will not be supporting the motion on the floor.
Councillor Henderson and Councillor Vasilakos.
So I don't know if we know how long it would take for the MZO to be revoked if we pass this today. And then going forward, we would have our regular open house public meeting to say that we want to change it from agriculture to industrial. How long does that process take? I'm thinking a year, but is it 2 years? Approximately how long does that take?
Ms. Thompson.
Through you, Your Worship, there are a number of steps that are set out by legislation as to how a public planning application process proceeds. It does require notice as well as consultation with agencies as well as the public. I don't want to suggest a time frame for this one because at this point staff have not had a chance to consider this, and if we could take this away and come back unless the planner, Ms. Bridge, is able to comment on a typical time frame, including appeals.
Yeah, through your worship, I would concur with what Ms. Thompson said. I think staff need to take this back and look at it a little bit further in terms of the process and any technical requirements. She is right, any planning process would be subject to an appeal period and appeals under the Planning Act to the local planning appeal tribunal. So that would potentially impact the time frame as well.
Councillor Beatty. Councillor Beatty. Do you have your hand up?
Yes, I did. Thank you, Your Worship. What I'd like to do is reach out to my colleagues and see if there's an opportunity to have a compromise here, a friendly amendment. Again, I mentioned it earlier. I think it comes as no surprise that for our community that our need, and it's not a want, but our need for industrial land is there. An understanding of Councillor Seben's desire to revoke the MZO in its entirety, but I truly believe that the compromise here is the fact that this land could be utilized for industrial purposes, and perhaps in the spirit of compromise is that if we could simply not revoke the MZO, but have the MZO amended for industrial purposes, that would be my wish.
So, Councillor, well, before I take that amendment, I saw Councillor Seben and Councillor Burback had their hand up, so go ahead.
Just in response to Councillor Beatty, unfortunately, no, I wouldn't be open to that amendment. I think Councillor Burback spoke about what the purpose of MZOs originally was, and Stratford at no point in history has had to use one, and I don't think we need to use one now, in my opinion.
Councillor Burback.
Thank you. Yes, we did already apply to have a general industrial zoning for that land, and it was rejected by the minister. So I don't understand if we go back again, whether it would be rejected again. So I think at this point, we should just cut our losses and use the regular planning process.
Councillor Vasilakos.
And I think I cut out before, so I just want to reiterate that having it in, it's, am I freezing up again?
You want to try turning off your video and see if just using audio is better?
My apologies. I just want to reiterate that really, if we're going to be expanding our industrial land, I think we want to do it in the most land efficient use, and also the most efficient use efficient use of dollars in terms of expanding services and things like that. And given where this parcel of land is, I don't think that it's the most rational approach to expanding industrial land. I think if we go use our regular process and allow staff to look at the other pieces that have been annexed and look at the servicing required for each of them and how we expand rationally out, because we are expanding out into agricultural land. And once you use it for industrial land, it's hard to go back. So my preference would be that we take a look at all of that land, and especially that land that is contiguous with our existing industrial land, and put our sights on rezoning that first and expanding sort of more rationally and stepwise out, makes more sense to me than having a piece of it's sort of out there on its own land that is zoned industrial and not serviced, and the furthest land to be serviced from what we annexed in from Perth South.
All right. Councillor Clifford, or sorry, Councillor Bunting.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. A couple of things that I might just want to mention. There's no doubt that we have to do something with this. There's no question whatsoever. The phrase I like to use, I don't like to throw the baby out with the bathwater. But having listened to the arguments from my fellow councillors, I can understand Councillor Beatty's comments, but I'm not sure that the minister is going to be very cooperative with respect to just taking out the glass plant thing and keeping it as industrial. When he was asked for the entire thing to be industrial, he wasn't accepting that. So that's an unknown. So based on that, I've listened to also Councillor Vasilakos and what she had to say, and the contiguous piece and so on and so forth. So what I would like to do is to suggest a friendly amendment that the MZO be revoked, number one, and that staff review the industrial land needs of the city of Stratford, which are getting painfully low, and we need to act on this ASAP, and that there be a public process with respect to the rezoning of the land. And I don't know if that is a friendly enough amendment for Councillor Seblin or not.
Can I just clarify if this is something that is being done or has been done already by staff?
Ms. Thompson or Juve?
Through you, Your Worship, could I ask Councillor Bunting to repeat the motion?
Yeah, what I've scribbled down here is that the MZO be revoked, that the staff review the industrial land needs of the city of Stratford and come up with a plan as to where we're going to go first and how it's going to be laid out and so on and so forth. And obviously that would be in conjunction with Invest Stratford, and that there be a public process with respect to changing the land from agricultural, excuse me, to industrial. Does that help?
Yes, thank you. If we could separate the two, that would be great. So the original motion and then Councillor Bunting's motion could be separate if that's amenable.
I thought my motion was incorporating your motion, however.
I think Councillor Sebin's asking that his motion take his own. If that is the case, then the second half would be Councillor Bunting. If that was to pass, you would put a motion on the floor to have staff review the city's industrial needs and designated public process for any new zoning to take place.
Yeah.
Okay. Councillor Ingram, I see your hand.
Yes, thank you. In response to what Councillor Bunting is asking for, this was completed as part of the support for the annexation of these lands. So I believe we already have a report available to us in terms of where the city's industrial land supply is and where we need to go.
Councillor Bunting.
Yes, my comment was with respect to how much of the land that we have annexed we would bite off first, as it were, to designate it, or are we looking at the whole thing? I'd be happy with the whole thing, to be honest with you.
Councillor Beatty.
So I appreciate my fellow councillors who have stated that we've already asked the minister in regards to changing it to industrial, which was not given at that time. I guess for me, I would rather try again and go down swinging than not to swing at that opportunity at all. If we were to ask the question and been told no, at least we would have been given that opportunity to have that considered. Right now, we're not even asking for that opportunity, which again, if we're told no, then we can go back to having this conversation again about just revoking it in its entirety. But I think the fact that we don't even try to ask is a missed opportunity.
Councillor Vasilakos.
I'm going to go back to Councillor Burbach's. MZOs are usually used for highly specific projects or remote communities, or where there's extenuating circumstances where the public process is somehow, you know, not available. I think I don't think it's worth asking for something that the MZO wasn't meant for, which is we have annexed land and we need to figure out how we're going to rezone it and how we're going to service it. And those are the usual activities of a municipality that we take on. There's no extenuating circumstance here that would warrant an MZO, and I don't think we should be asking for something that isn't warranted. We have a report that says we need industrial land. We have industrial land. We have staff that are able to phase out that phase. We've done it before. We've phased industrial expansion in land that we have. Those are all capacities that we have that we can do in-house, and we can start immediately. So I would say part of Councillor Bunting was to do the report on how much we need. We have that. The second part of his motion was to start the process, to start bringing more industrial land online. And that's just regular municipal activities, right? So I don't think it warrants a request to the minister, and I don't think municipalities should get into the habit of doing that.
All right. Anything further? Councillor Henderson.
Just a quick question. So if we decided to start the public process, would we be able to do that for all the land, well, ahead of waiting for the ministry to get back to us? Like, we don't know how long it would take for them to say yay or no to revoking it, right? I'm assuming they're going to revoke it, but we can't assume anything, right? So can we actually start the process, or would we have to only be able to do the part that isn't part of the MZO?
The public process, you'd have to wait for the MZO to be revoked because we don't have the ability to change what the minister's put in place. Any of the other lands that are been annexed into the city can start that process. And I'll look to the CAO to correct me in case I'm wrong.
No, and just through your worship, I just wanted to add that the annex lands are not owned by the city of Stratford. So there is a process to go through with respect to who will be submitting the applications.
Councillor Beattie.
So I just want to be clear about this. So if I'm understanding correctly from the majority of my colleagues, we would be in agreement that there is a need for industrial lands. It's just a matter of how we go about this process. But if I'm also understanding our staff correctly, we only have availability of lands for approximately the next year and a half. We have no clear timeline as to how long this process could take. So in essence, we're handcuffing our economic development team, because as we know, our industrial lands have been selling at breakneck speed, and good and bad of that is good news is that businesses want to come to Stratford. The bad news is that if we continue at this pace, we won't have lands ready to go when these lands are expired. So I just want to make sure that we're all aware of this decision as we go forward. And again, I think the opportunity here to have a compromise would be in the best interest of our community. But again, I'll move as our council does.
Councillor Burbach.
Yeah, just in response to that, I do think economic development is really important, but we also do have a labor shortage in this area, so that also needs to be taken into consideration. We have a very small supply of housing, so expanding our development by building some new industrial is great, but we also need to have other supports in the community that will shore that up. We need to have people that will work at these places and the ability for them to live here affordably. So I think that also needs to be taken into consideration.
Councillor Burback, I'm going to correct one thing. We just finished a pumping station, which opened up over 200 acres of new residential land, and we're at an all-time building high. So we are actually growing, and with that comes the availability to have housing in town needs labor as well and jobs for people. And I'd hate for us to wait till we got to a really low unemployment rate to get serious about future economic prosperity in case we find ourselves with some large manufacturers ever closing, which our city has faced in the past. Councillor Seven.
Thank you. I just wanted, I guess, to just closing remarks. I feel like, I really do trust in the process that we have in place and the zoning practices that we have, and we have a new zoning bylaw in the near future, and I think all those things are, they're good practices, and I think we should stick to that and zone things with our municipality.
Anything further? All right, I'll let the city clerk call the question when she's ready.
So through your worship, it is my understanding that the motion, which was moved by Councillor Seven and seconded by Councillor Burback, is that staff submit a request on behalf of Stratford City Council to the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing to request the revocation or the repealing of the Ministerial Zoning Order OREG 356-20. So when I state your name, please state whether you are in support or opposed to this motion. So beginning with Councillor Seven.
Support.
Councillor Bunting.
Support, sorry.
Councillor Vasilakos.
Support.
Councillor Ingram.
Support.
Councillor Burback.
Support.
Mayor Matheson.
Support.
Councillor Henderson.
Support.
Councillor Beatty.
Opposed.
Councillor Ritzma.
Support.
Councillor Clifford.
Opposed.
Councillor Gaffney. Councillor, could you restate that?
Support.
So through your worship, there are 9 members in support and 2 members that are opposed, and there were no members who are absent, and there are no declarations of pecuniary interest on this item.
Thank you, that will carry. Councillor Bunting, you had your hand up for a follow-up motion. Councillor Clifford, sorry.
Yeah, I've got to excuse myself. I have an appointment. I'm sorry, I'll have to leave. Thank you.
Do you want to, okay, Councillor Clifford, do you want to, or Bunting, do you want to propose your motion?
Yeah, that would staff review the industrial land needs for the city of Stratford, and that a public process for rezoning of the land will take place in the hopefully not too distant future.
So I think your timeline would be to have them report back to council as soon as possible.
Yes, thank you very much.
Councillor Ritzma, you'll second that. Councillor Ingram.
Thank you. Can we split that into 2 parts? Number 1 is the report on the industrial land, and number 2 is beginning the public process.
Or we can, I'll allow the splitting of them. Anything further? Councillor Seven.
I'm sorry, could we clarify exactly what the public process piece is, or maybe I misunderstood that.
The public process would be a rezoning for land for industrial purposes.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. I'll let the clerk read back the first motion.
So for your worship, it's my understanding that the first motion is that staff review the industrial land needs of the city of Stratford and report back to Stratford City Council at a later date.
Councillor Henderson or Councillor Vasilakos, in that order, I saw your hands.
I'm a bit confused why we need this motion. We've already had a motion from staff and we had a annexation meeting last January. So we know it's important. I guess I just assumed they'd be going ahead and doing this, but I guess what we need to do is tell them we want it done right away. Is that what we're doing right now? I just want to double check.
I think they'll also want to give you some servicing options for the lands involved so that they can figure out how you'd staged it, similar to what Councillor Vasilakos had proposed earlier. Councillor Vasilakos and Councillor Ingram.
So I was going to say, so that the motion that we're talking about right now, I mean, I think, I don't know if I think we're looking for a staff report to come back around what are the next steps that we need to do to bring that industrial land online, and the staging of it, the servicing, the costs involved, the issues around ownership of that land and how that rolls out. I think that's something we need to get back so that we can start to then have a decision. I think saying that we're going to launch a process in the absence of having that report, I think is a little premature. So I'm in support of the first motion, but I'm not necessarily in support of the second motion because I don't know exactly what process we're proving to go forward.
Councillor Ingram.
Yeah, thank you. I was just going to clarify that I think what we're looking for is the staging of industrial land report. It's not necessarily a supply demand, it's a staging. And that's more the report I think we're looking for, which is very different from the report that was used to support the annexation.
All right. All those in favor of the motion? Opposed, if any? That's carried. The second half of that motion was to start a public rezoning process for the lands identified after that report is received and approved by council. Discussion. Councillor Henderson.
Could we defer that until after we get the report back? Because that's the time I think we should probably do that.
You're making a deferral motion.
Yes, I am.
Seconder. Councillor Ingram. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? It's carried. All right, we'll go on to the next item.
Through your worship, item 9 is reports of the standing committee, and item 9.1 is the report of the Planning and Heritage Committee, and there's one item listed, and that is item 9.1.1, update on proposed short-term rental accommodation regulations.
Moved by Councillor Ritzma, seconded by Councillor Bunting. Discussion. Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried.
Item 9.2 is report of the Community Services Committee, and there is one item listed, and that is item 9.2.1, agreement with the local community food center.
Moved by Councillor Beatty, second by Councillor Vasilakos. Discussion. Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried.
Item 10 is notice of intent, and item 10.1 is notice of public meeting for the intent to permanently close a portion of TJ Dolan Drive. And the City of Stratford Council will hold a public meeting on Monday, March 15th at 6 p.m. to hear all interested persons with respect to the permanent closure of TJ Dolan Drive from St. David Street to Center Street. And this is for the purpose of converting to multi-use trail. Further details can be found on the attached notice with the agenda. Moving on to item 11, reading of the bylaws. There are 8 bylaws which require first and second readings and third and final readings that can be taken collectively upon unanimous vote of council. And then there is one bylaw which has already received first and second readings and therefore requires third and final reading. The first 8 requiring first, second, third, and final are as follows. Item 11.1, lease agreement with the local community food center. Item 11.2, appointment of an alternate SABA representative to the Heritage Stratford Advisory Committee. Item 11.3, conveyance from 259-882-8852 of Part 1 on Plan 44R-5820. Item 11.4, the dedication of Part 1, Plan 44R-5820 as public highway forming part of Ontario Street. Item 11.5, which is conveyance from Whole Quality Homes, Part 4 on Plan 44R-5803. Item 11.6, which is dedication of Part 4 on Plan 44R-5803 as public highway forming part of Vivian Street Line 37. Item 11.7, which is the Stratford City Center Business Improvement Area 2021 levy. And item 11.8, which is to amend the traffic and parking bylaw to amend no stopping and prohibited parking restrictions. The item requiring third and final reading is item 11.9, which is to amend the zoning bylaw with respect to zone change application Z09-19 for 236 Britannia Street.
Take bylaws 11.1 through 8 collectively if possible. Mover, Councillor Henderson and Councillor Vasilakos. All those in favor? Opposed, if any, that's carried. So we'll go to reading first and second reading of bylaws 11.1 through 8. Councillor Bunting will move. Second will be Councillor Ingram. Discussion. Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed, if any, and that's carried. Third and final reading of bylaw 11.1 through 8. Councillor Beattie and Councillor Gaffney. Discussion. All those in favor? Opposed, if any, and that's carried. Bylaw 11.9 needs its third and final reading. A mover. Councillor Ingram, seconder Councillor Henderson. Discussion. Councillor Henderson, Councillor Seven.
So if we turn this down as a council and we don't have, well, how do I say this? Like staff's recommending it. And so if we turn it down as a council without, I guess the word is good reasoning, then the developer can take us to LPAC and then there, and I'm only going by the last 14 years I've been on council, I would assume they would win there and then it would come back to council and we would be paying all the costs for that, right? So I just kind of want to clarify that in my mind that it is good planning sense and it's already been approved by our planner. So then if we went to LPAC, we'd have to, I don't know, what would we have to do? Hire our own planner to go and fight that? And I know I'm thinking way ahead, but I mean, I've seen different developments that were on different things that we turned down because of, you know, neighbors opposing it. And of course, it affects your brain and your heart, right? But when you have good planning sense, and we know that a lot of times when these developments go forward, it ends up being okay. It's not, doesn't make everybody happy, of course, but I mean, you know, I'm just concerned about that. I don't know if there's any answer for it.
Not sure I can provide one or staff. Ms. Thompson's gonna.
Thank you. Through you, Your Worship. In response to Councillor Henderson's question, which I believe to be what would be the steps if we were to go to LPAT because the applicant or someone else made a filed an appeal. The applicant, depending on which decision council makes tonight, does have the right to appeal the decision to LPAT because the report has been supported by planning staff and has come through that process, that we would need to retain legal advice, a city solicitor, as well as a planner to represent council's position at LPAT, as we could not use our city planner because the report has been recommended to council by staff.
Anyone else have any? Councillor Seven.
Thank you. Is a recorded vote possible for this item?
Yes, you can ask for one.
If I could ask for that, please. And I just wanted to comment that, you know, I understand there has been an extent of compromise on the part of the builder or the developer. I just don't feel like, you know, I guess I just don't feel like there's been enough, and I just feel like we haven't pushed enough for the residents that live either abutting or in the neighborhood, and so I do oppose the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Burback.
Thank you. It was also my understanding when I talked to some residents that they were planning to take this to appeal at LPAT. So then we end up in the same position no matter which way we go with it.
Well, the difference is if we approve it, our staff planner is there who has to advocate for the decision. If we reject it, our staff planner is there as a witness for the other side to determine it. And in some cases, if our staff have made a recommendation in one direction and we go in a separate, we then have to hire an independent person to defend council's decision on it. So it's somewhat complicated.
Thank you for that clarification.
Yeah, no problem. Anything further? I'll turn it over to the clerk whenever she's ready.
So for you, your worship, beginning with Councillor 7, please state whether you are in support or opposed to the bylaw being read a third and final time. So Councillor 7.
Opposed?
Councillor Bunting.
Support.
Councillor Vasilakos.
Support.
Councillor Ingram.
Support.
Councillor Burbach.
Support.
Mayor Matheson.
Opposed.
Councillor Henderson.
Support.
Councillor Beatty.
Support.
Councillor Ritzma.
Opposed.
Councillor Gaffney.
Opposed.
So through you, your worship, there are 6 members in support, 4 opposed, and 1 absent.
I'll declare third and final reading of that bylaw and it carries. Next item.
Item 12 is the consent agenda. Are there any items listed on the consent agenda to be considered by council?
Councillor Gaffney.
Thank you, Your Worship. Item CA 2021-031. Can someone explain the logic in putting a bar inside a variety store? Or maybe there is no logical explanation.
Ms. Defoe.
Through your worship, what we can advise is that a number of convenience stores, specifically 7-Eleven, have requested to serve alcohol at their establishment. There are a number of applications currently being presented to the Alcohol and Gaming Commission of Ontario throughout Southwestern Ontario. That is all of the information we have regarding them.
Councillor Gaffney.
Thank you, Your Worship. There's part of the report says that in the last 6 months, there's been 6 call-outs to this location, or in the last 14 months. Most of us will recall that about a year and a half ago, there was an attempted murder in the parking lot of that establishment. Can we oppose this? Can I make a motion to oppose approval of this consent agenda item?
Sure you can.
Then that's so.
Ms. Defoe, I heard the clerk let out a sigh when I said something, so.
Through your worship, it's my understanding the process would be for council to pass a motion advising of specific concerns. That information would then be relayed to the AGCO along with all the other information currently on the consent agenda.
Well, then, and I don't know if this is what you're looking for, but I'd like to make a motion that we turn this down because we don't want to start putting bars in our variety stores.
I see Councillor Ingram's hand and Councillor Vasilakos. They might build on some of your objections on the motion. So Councillor Ingram.
Yeah, thank you. And I will second that motion with the addition that there is a conflict of use between providing a gas bar with a drinking bar and, you know, the pedestrian connection between drinking and having to walk versus the vehicular connection of a gas bar. There's just a lot of land use conflict and pedestrian versus vehicle conflicts happening there. So that would be another reason why it just doesn't work.
Okay, Councillor Vasilakos, then Councillor Henderson.
I was going to make the exact same point as Councillor Ingram. It is incompatible that you have a gas station where people go to fill up gas to drive at the same place that you will be serving alcohol.
Thank you.
That
Councillor
has to be
Henderson.
consumed on site.
Well, I'm a bit confused because when I first heard about this, I thought they were just applying that they could sell alcohol, you know, like the grocery stores are in their business. I didn't realize they wanted to put a bar in. Like, if they wanted to put a bar, say in the one in Stratford, would they not require more parking spots? Because wouldn't they sort of fall now under, I don't know, is it more like a dining or bar establishment? Because they're not downtown, so they would require, but they require more parking. Like I don't understand. Like, I'm opposed to it even being sold in the grocery stores, and I'm certainly opposed to it being sold at 7-Eleven. So I'm confused that they're wanting to put, like, I know our 7-Eleven, unless they're going to take a whole row of what they're selling for food out, it's small. Like, I don't know how they would even do it.
The clerk's office is just giving me the word that what they'd like us to do is refer this to staff. They are going to review the land planning issues that have been identified, and they've received correspondence from the establishment as well that just came in late today that they hadn't seen. So if we could defer action on this to staff to report back on March 22nd. Councillor Henderson and Councillor Seven, thank you. All those in favor? Opposed, if any, and that's carried. Thank you. Defoe.
Through your worship, it's Burback has her hand under consent agenda.
Sorry, Councillor Burback.
Thank you. Yes, I'd like to bring forward CA 2021-029, which is the resolution from the City of St. Catharines calling on the provincial government to permanently legislate universal paid sick days for all workers. I'd like us to endorse that.
Seconder is Councillor Vasilakos. Discussion. Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried.
So through your worship, turning to the next item on your agenda is item 13. Are there any new business items?
Councillor Ingram, Councillor Burback.
Thank you, and I'll try to make this as quick as possible. In going through some old minutes, I realized that there were a couple of things that we have not discussed due to COVID and quite a bit of few minutes. So I was wondering if there was any new information from the province regarding the Highway 7 and 8 realignment project.
Mr. Dolovic.
Yeah, through your worship. No, we have not heard from the ministry. It's been a couple of years since we've heard anything at all on the project. It doesn't even appear that the EA has been finalized, the environmental assessment. I have reached out to the project manager from the ministry. They should be back in the office this week, and hopefully we'll get a response as to what the status of that project is.
Thank you, Mr. Dolovic. My next question was in July 23rd of 2018, there was to be a Grand Trunk Community Hub SLA advisory group struck. And it's my understanding that this advisory group was never brought together because we were waiting on some funding announcements. Do I have that correct?
Ms. Defoe.
Through your worship, yes, that is correct. The city had submitted a funding application and wanted to ensure there was funding for the development of the community hub before creating this advisory committee. Staff are continuing to review additional funding opportunities, and should the city secure such funding, we would then initiate the process to create this committee.
Okay, thank you. And I'm hoping that we're also keeping our eye out for any funding opportunities for the Heritage Stratford project related to the Heritage Conservation District Standards updates for the downtown core.
Through your worship, yes, staff are actively looking for any funding opportunities for these types of projects.
Great, thank you. And I think my last item is for infrastructure and transportation. So I'm good.
Councillor Henderson.
Well, I don't remember when I brought this up, but I think I brought it up, say 2 years ago. I think it was around February, that we would start a fundraising committee. Is there any reason while we're waiting for grants to get approved that we couldn't start fundraising so that we, you know, like, does that affect your grant when you're trying to, you know, or would it help the grant to show that, oh, we've already got $5 million, $10 million donated? Like, I know it's a hard year to start it because businesses have really been struggling. Some businesses haven't been though, they've been doing really good. So I mean, if we get the fundraising started, and they always say that fundraising does better when you're working towards a project, I'd like to see us get started on this so that when we get funding, or maybe we'll raise enough in our community that we can just get this done. Do we need a motion? Like, I made a motion back about us starting a fundraising committee. I guess I'm asking now where that's at and when it was.
So for your, so no, a new motion is not required, as one was made. The Finance and Labor Relations Committee meeting held in December, there was a motion put forward for staff to review the Grand Trunk Community Hub, removing the burned out portion and providing a follow-up report to Stratford City Council. It is my understanding it is on the list of projects to be completed at this time. I do not have a timeline on when that report will be presented. However, information will be forthcoming to council on this whole topic. So I'm hoping if we can just wait a bit longer, then we can come back with this comprehensive report and then continue work on.
Councillor Henderson.
Much is a little bit longer, a month.
For your worship, as noted, we do not have a timeline. There are a number of projects that are ongoing for staff. We will endeavor to bring it back as soon as we realistically can. I'm happy to provide more information potentially at a later date on when a report could be expected for Stratford City Council.
Is there anything for us to stop us? Like in the past, we've started many subcommittees and advisory committees and that. Is there anything to stop us from starting a fundraising committee to start getting applications from people that would be interested in being on a fundraising committee?
Ms. Thompson.
Through your worship,
there we go. There we go.
There she
okay. Is. Sorry. My video is frozen. There is a structure that we need to put in place if we're going to set up a fundraising committee and look for volunteers to work on that committee. There will also need to be terms of reference and some material that needs to be put together. So it is, there is a process to be followed there because we want it to be successful. We do respectfully ask council to consider the workload that staff currently have in a pandemic. We know that this is critical, but if you would allow us some more time to take this back and with the resources that we have available, come up with a report to come back to council.
Thank you. I believe I had Councillor Burback and Councillor Ritzma.
Thank you. Yeah, hearkening back to earlier conversation about the patios and Wellington, I'd like to make a motion that staff investigate making Wellington temporarily a one-way street for the summer to expand pedestrian and cycling infrastructure in that area as well.
Seconder for that motion. Councillor Vasilakos. Councillor Seven and Councillor Vasilakos.
Thank you. So just to clarify for myself and the public, this is just to report back on the feasibility of doing that.
Yes. Councillor Vasilakos.
I like the idea of taking a lane out to improve pedestrian and active transportation. I'm always wary of one-way streets because they tend to increase speeds. So if we were to go to one way, it would require having some speed mitigation parts to it, like narrowing of the street and putting up, barriers and things like that, so that we don't end up with what usually happens is which is pedestrians now and cyclists being involved on roads that have increased speeds.
Thank you. Councillor Ingram.
Thank you. And I'm not sure if this is a question for the Director of Infrastructure or the CAO, but I seem to recall that we looked at this option, and I can't recall if it was through the development of Market Square or if it was as part of some of the items that we were looking at last year for the pandemic. Can somebody refresh my memory?
Through your worship, yeah, I'd have to refresh my memory as well. I remember this has come up before, and I can't recall what the issues were, but if this motion passes, we'll definitely look at what the issues were the last time and what's required in going forward with it. If we would come back in a report saying what the steps are required in order to make it one way, what are the issues, what's the public involvement, et cetera, that we would have to go through.
Thank you. And perhaps for the fire chief, I do seem to recall that emergency response was one of the issues. Do I have that correct?
Through your worship, yes, that was one of the issues that came up, but we'd revisit that with the Director of Infrastructure and Development to make sure everything's still the same as it was before.
Thank you.
All right, that's moved and seconded to refer back to staff for a report. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? And that carries. All right. Next item on the agenda. Anyone else? Councillor Ritzman, did you have your hand up first?
Yes, and it was going back to the Grand Trunk capital campaign, community campaign around that, and the CAO summed up my thoughts with regards to being patient, waiting, and having a project specifics in place prior to going ahead with anything of a campaign.
Okay, thank you. Right. Seeing nothing else under new business, we could take a motion to adjourn to standing committees. I think we'll give everyone 5 minutes to have a quick break and then come back if we could. Councillor Vasilakos and Councillor Burback, all those in favor? That's carried. Thank you.
So the funding option, it's to do development.
Councillor Ritzman, will turn the meeting to you as chair. I believe you're listed for chairing the planning.
Thank you, Mayor Matheson. So I'd like to call to order the Planning and Heritage Committee. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interests? Seeing none. Item 3, there are no delegations scheduled. Item 4 is report of management of development services. Item 4.1, zone change application Z04-20 with the municipal address of 3797 Downey Road 112. And Mr. Lunison, I believe you're available to give us a brief presentation from staff.
Actually, I think Mr. Lunison's signature is attached to the report incorrectly. I actually wrote the report. It's Jeff Bannon, city planner. Yeah.
Thank you, Jeff. So go right ahead.
Okay, I'm just setting up the presentation. Zone change application was submitted by Baker Planning Group to change the zoning for a portion of the property at 3797 Downey Road 112 from a general industrial I-216H zone to a general industrial I-2 special zone. The original application was to permit a restaurant with a maximum gross floor area of 210 square meters and an accessory drive-through, a gas bar, a neighborhood store with a maximum gross floor area of 210 square meters, and a car wash as additional permitted uses. The applicant is also requesting that the existing holding symbol be removed from the zone, as well as provisions to require a minimum of 1 parking space for a car wash, 1 parking space for every 4 dining seats for the restaurant, and to allow parking spaces to be 2.8 meters wide by 5.6 meters in length. At the Planning and Heritage meeting on February 8th, the applicant requested that the matter be deferred in order to provide additional time to address the concerns that were raised by engineering and planning staff. After reviewing those concerns, the applicant has removed the request to allow a restaurant use within the I-2 special zone. In addition, engineering has received new sanitary servicing concepts with calculations, and the transportation consultant has updated their traffic impact study to satisfy the city's concerns. Engineering has noted that with updated information and the removal of the restaurant as a permitted use, they no longer object to the rezoning application. The subject lands of the application are located on the southeast corner of the intersection of Lorne Avenue East and Downey Road 112. The subject lands have an area of approximately 1 hectare. The provincial policy statement provides direction to municipalities to prohibit residential uses and prohibit or limit other sensitive land uses in employment areas. The city's official plan designates lands for industrial purposes to accommodate growth to the year 2033 and contains a framework to establish permitted uses within employment areas. The applicant has submitted a supplemental planning opinion letter that contains additional information regarding traffic counts, neighboring land uses on Lorne Avenue, and the availability of gas bars in the immediate area that are available to provide service to employees and the surrounding industrial area. With the removal of the restaurant use in conjunction with the information provided, planning staff are satisfied that the gas bar with an accessory neighborhood store and a car wash are considered to be ancillary to the permitted industrial land users in the area. The applicant notes that the existing commercial zone properties along Lorne Avenue East already have tenants that do not include a gas bar with an associated neighborhood store land use. They also have noted that other vacant properties on Lorne Avenue are not of a sufficient size to accommodate safe transport truck movements for a gas bar land use. The proposed site is expected to provide vehicular access from 2 streets, which will allow for safe truck access to service the gas station. A portion of the subject lands will also remain in an industrial zone without any special provisions, and the proposed land uses to be rezoned will provide services for the future industrial tenants on the remainder of the lands. Staff are of the opinion that the uses are in conformity with the official plan. The subject lands are currently zoned General Industrial I-216H zone, and that holding provision prevents development on the lands until sufficient water, sanitary, and storm services are provided and the holding provision has been lifted. Engineering services now satisfied that sufficient services can be provided to the development and the holding provision can be removed from the lands. Planning staff are also of the opinion that the 10 stacking spaces before the automatic car wash bay are needed in order to control vehicular movements on the property. The concept plan that was submitted by the applicant demonstrates that 11 spaces can be provided before the car wash bay and 1 space can be provided after the bay. The concept plan showing a minimum 10 spaces before the car wash is sufficient to control vehicular movements on the property. And the applicant has also requested that the parking space sizes are reduced to 2.8 meters wide by 5.6 meters. This dimension is the same measurement that is being proposed in the draft comprehensive zoning bylaw. Planning staff have compared the size of the requested neighborhood store with other gas bars that also have a neighborhood store component. There are 2 more recent gas bar locations, one at 269 Erie Street and the other one at 405 Huron Street, that have smaller neighborhood store components of approximately 95 square meters, but they do contain fewer gas pumps on the site and have an overall smaller area. Also, the recently approved development at 677 Erie Street, which is located on the corner of Erie and Lorne Avenue, they allow for a neighborhood store of 198 square meters, and it also has a food service component of 153 square meters. If the neighborhood store is permitted only in conjunction with a gas bar, as what is being proposed, we can consider it to be accessory and permitted within that industrial zone. We feel that the zoning bylaw amendment is consistent with the provincial policy statement in conformity with the official plan and the intent of the zoning bylaw, and consistent with the city's strategic policies. We have circulated the application to other departments. Building, transit, fire department, and township of Perth East have no concerns. Engineering services now are satisfied and they no longer have any concerns with the updated information that was provided. Invest Stratford, they have noted that it would be the preference of their department that the entirety of the property be developed for light industrial uses, but they understand that the owner is more familiar with the commercial types of development and that this phase of the development is essential for their business plan. And they are not opposed to the I-2 special zone for the commercial uses cited, with the understanding that they will provide services for the surrounding mixed use businesses. The public was circulated with the application. One resident had expressed a concern with the impact of the rezoning on the supply of industrial land within the city. We do have a recommendation before you, and it's open to your consultation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bannon. Questions or comments for Mr. Bannon? Councillor Gaffney. You're gonna mute yourself.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Couple of questions for Mr. Bannon on the conceptual site plan figure 3. It still shows, and maybe I'm confused, it still shows a restaurant on that drawing, but there's not going to be a restaurant.
That is correct. They will need to update their site plan when they come in with an application, and that use will be a different use. So they haven't done the update to that site plan. They haven't submitted a new drawing to us yet, but they have made the request to remove that restaurant use.
Okay, thank you. And the other thing I was wondering about as we move forward further in the 21st century, if we can ask them to provide at least one charging station as part of this project, because it's going to be a thing. And if you go out in the 401, the charging stations are at the gas station. So I just throw that out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gaffney. Any further questions? Councillor Seven.
Thank you. I was just wondering what is different about the traffic impact study compared to, or if there is a difference from now compared to when it was originally refused by staff?
The chair. So now the traffic impact study has been updated to provide some pedestrian counts, which was additional information that engineering was looking for. Engineering also recognizes that the restaurant use would be a high impact volume for the amount of vehicles that would be going to that site. And with the removal of that restaurant use, the impacts on the surrounding streets are much lower.
Okay, thank you. And I just had a follow-up. So at the end of the motion, it says, and that no further notice is required. I'm just wondering what other notice would typically be given and if this is something that is often done.
Through the chair, this is something that's often done when there's been changes that have been made to the request before council. If those changes are considered to be less onerous on the application, or they're in greater compliance with the zoning bylaw than what would have already existed. So in this case, since they're removing the restaurant use, they're removing an additional permitted use that they had originally requested. And that we feel that it's not necessary to recirculate the public with that additional change. If they were asking for additional permitted uses, we would suggest that the applicant would need to go back out to the public, and we would have to recirculate the public and other city departments to make sure that those additional permitted uses are something that is in keeping with the surrounding area. But in this case, since they're removing something that they were requesting and they didn't already have it in place, they wouldn't need to recirculate.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I have Councillor Ingram and then Councillor Gaffney.
Thank you. And just in response to Councillor Gaffney's comments about the EV charging stations, and I completely agree with him, but I'm wondering if Mr. Bannon would be able to explain to council the idea of conditional zoning and how conditions are not able to be placed on zoning reapplications.
Through the chair, certainly, yes. Councillor Ingram is correct. We wouldn't be able to put conditions on the rezoning application. It would be something that we could request of the applicant to put in a charging station when they come forward with a site plan application. But I wouldn't suggest that we'd be able to put that into the zone itself.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, no, let me apologize. I did not mean to suggest that that they be required to do it. I in fact was making a suggestion. So, but thank you for pointing that out, Councillor Ingram. And I'd like to move the staff recommendation if I could.
If I may, Councillor Gaffney, I'm wondering if we could move that we hear the presentation by Ms. Baker.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Would you move that, and a seconder for that? Councillor Henderson is seconding that. All in favor? Thank you. And that's carried. Ms. Baker, are you available?
I am, yes, thank you. Good evening, Chair and members of committee. Thank you for a few minutes to speak. Just a few additional comments to Mr. Bannon's presentation. It was very thorough and comprehensive, and certainly accurately outlined the application and the modifications to it. We have reviewed the city staff report and are supportive of the recommendation. As noted, the owner has agreed to remove the request for the restaurant on the subject site to address previous concerns noted by staff. In our opinion, the resultant gas station with a neighborhood store and the car wash, which is permitted as of right on the site, will support the industrial area as well as future development on the remaining larger portion of the site for industrial uses. As noted, engineering staff supports both the servicing report and the traffic study, and the characterization was correct on the revision to the traffic study. Additional site plan level detail information on pedestrian movement and flow was provided by the transportation engineer, as well as an indication on the reduced traffic flows by removing the restaurant. So I think I'll leave it at that, but certainly happy to answer any further questions committee may have. Thank you.
Any questions for Ms. Baker? Seeing none, Mr. Councillor Gaffney, would you like to make a motion at this stage?
I would like to move the staff recommendation, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. A seconder for that. Councillor Ingram, thank you. Any further discussion? Councillor Vasilakos.
I'm mostly just sort of commenting on, we have approved, a number of gas stations over the years. And as I look forward to electrification of vehicular traffic of cars and trucks over time, by adding new, by adding new gas stations, are we increasing the risk that some of the older gas stations end up closing? And do we increase the chance of ending up with more of those abandoned gas stations in town? And I'm just wondering if we have if there's any sort of long-term planning that goes into how many of these sites we might end up with as we move to electric vehicles. And that's more of a sort of longer term question for staff, whether we've considered that, either the environmental impacts, also though the land use impacts.
Thank you. I'm not sure if any staff want to jump in on that, or we'll take that as a comment. Kathy, Councillor Vasilakos. Thank you. So we have a staff recommendation has been moved by Councillor Gaffney, second by Councillor Ingram. If there's no further questions or comments, I will call the question. All in favor? Opposed, if any? 2 opposed, that's noted, and that's passed. And item number 5, motion to adjourn. Moved by Councillor Seven, second by Councillor Burbach. All in favor? Thank you, and we're adjourned.
This time, I believe it is Councillor Vasilakos with Information, Transportation and Safety.
Yep, thank you. I'll call the Infrastructure, Transportation and Safety Committee to order. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest and the general nature thereof? Seeing none. Item number 3 is the subcommittee minutes. They're there for you to read at your leisure. Item number 4 is delegations, and there are none scheduled. And item number 5 is report of the Manager of Environmental Services. And item 5.1, I think Mr. Jalovic is on the line. Maybe you can just briefly go over the purpose of these reports that we see, simply because of the importance to municipal councillors of understanding their responsibilities to the Clean Water Act.
Yes, through the chair. Yeah, not so much the reports, but just the overall responsibility that you as council have. As we talked about in subcommittee, council is, it's one of these ones that you're actually liable if something goes wrong. And it's council's responsibility to ensure that staff is doing its job and maintaining the system, that we have financial plans in place that we update every 5 years as part of our permits, that monies are being allocated properly for asset management, replacing the infrastructure out there. And so these reports that are filed yearly that go on the city website is also for council's information, so that they are aware that we are taking care of the water system, and it's protecting the residents and protecting council, as I said earlier, that there is a liability as a councillor for this. And so that's why these reports come every year to council. And I know we had some good discussion at the committee, at subcommittee. And if there's any questions, I'll do my best to answer them, or I will get back to staff if there's any specifics that members of council may have.
So thank you. So item 5.1 is drinking water quality management standard 2020 infrastructure review. There is a subcommittee recommendation there, but do we have any questions on that report before I look for a mover and seconder? Seeing none, so if I could get someone to move and second, moved by Councillor Gaffney, seconded by Councillor Burback, all in favor? Opposed, if any, and that's carried. And then item 5.2, related but similar, drinking water quality management standard 2019 management review. So are there any questions on that report? If not, if I could get a mover and a seconder for the subcommittee recommendation, moved by Councillor Ingram, seconded by Councillor Bunting, all in favor? Opposed, if any, and that's carried. Moving on to item number 6 is report of the project engineer. And 6.1 is the Argyle and Mackenzie Street reconstruction. And there was a public engagement and we have a recommendation there. Mr. Jolovic, did you want to just quickly go over that one before we take any questions?
Yeah, just through the chair. As noted this year, we couldn't do our normal public information centers that we hold where we invite out members to the public to actually see the drawings. So we did it virtually for it. Great attendance in that we had a couple of hundred hits as a result of the information on the website. As noted from staff, this is something we're going to do in the future, even when we go back to those in-person meetings with the people. We also want to have information available on the website for those individuals who, because of their schedules, cannot make it out to the public meeting. So we'll be doing both. Our typical comments that we got from it, happy to see that we're preserving the trees. A lot of them were asking about our programs that we have for household lateral repairs or reconstructions. So there'll be probably a number of residents who will be taking part in that program that we offer. So overall, positive comments, and the residents are looking forward to the work taking place this year.
Any questions on that? No, seeing none, there is a subcommittee recommendation there, moved by Councillor Ingram, seconded by Councillor Seven, all in favor, opposed if any, and I think the rest of the items are for your information, although Councillor Ingram, I think you have an item. Oh, and sorry, the city clerk has something for me. Yes, Ms. Defoe?
Through the chair, under item 7.1, there is a subcommittee recommendation listed for consideration, and that's that staff investigate the potential for a drop-off location at the landfill for organic materials and cooking oil, and the number of residents that would need to participate to ensure the program was economically viable.
That's right. Sorry, I forgot about that one. Moved by Councillor Burback, seconded by Councillor Ingram. Any questions around that? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed if any, and that's carried. The rest is for information, but Councillor Ingram has an item that she would like to bring forward. Go ahead.
Thank you. Yes, and it's related to item 7.3 and Council's role in environmental initiatives. In discussions with the Director of Infrastructure, I asked if we have ever received any past quotes regarding the installation of solar panels on the roof of the Rotary Complex, the Agroplex, and Dufferin Arena. And the director replied that the city did meet with a company that approached the city about installing solar panels. But I'm wondering, I'd like to put forward a motion that the city go out for with an RFP process related to the installation of solar panels on those 3 particular buildings.
Can I get a seconder for that? Councillor Burback seconded. Any discussion around that? Councillor Henderson and then Councillor Gaffney.
So would the idea be that it would be for use only, or would we be selling it back to the grid? Because I'm not sure that it would generate enough power for it to sort of offset the cost, but it might the other way. Because we have what, 12 different solar panel projects in the city right now, and I'm just wondering, like, I remember one time Eric Eberhardt was saying there was somebody that put them on this house, and he said you really sort of have to be young to put solar panels on for them to get the cost recovery going forward, unless you sell it to the grid.
So Councillor Ingram, did you want to speak to what the RFP would cover, or whether it would be for, there would be a cost analysis in the options?
I think the director was ready to speak, so I'll let him speak.
Okay.
Yeah, through the chair. I mean, when we did meet with the company, they did provide us a proposal. I mean, the way it works now in Ontario, it needs to be associated with a building that uses power, and so they were looking at the Rotary complex, and again, with the large roof area that we have. I'd have to go back and look at some numbers that they generated, but there's, they were looking at, potential public-private partnership in that. So we'd have to review that and look at what an RFP would look like. But during those discussions, they did say there was a benefit to doing that, and the potential to offset some costs and potentially earn some dollars too. But that would pay for the project. So that was the basis of their proposal at the time.
Councillor Ingram, and I think I had Councillor Gaffney first, and then Councillor Ingram, and then Councillor Burbank.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Would Festival Hydro be a part of this conversation?
Through the chair, at the time, it was really, it's dealing with the building owner that you're dealing with, because it goes through their meter. And as I recall the conversation, we also looked at, as part of that project, at actually having some EV stations installed as part of it when we were discussing it.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Ingram, and then Councillor Burbank.
Yeah, thank you. So I think, maybe going out for an RFP is premature, and I can refer this back to staff to come back with a report related to this. But it's, number one, it reduces our carbon footprint, or helps reduce our carbon footprint, which is one of our environmental initiatives through the strategic plan. It provides a little bit of revenue, or a potential revenue source. And then there's some other benefits that we might be able to gain through this. So I'll leave that revised motion out there.
So Councillor Burbank, are you okay with the revised motion for a referral back to staff before going to any RFP?
Yes.
Yeah. And you had a comment?
Yeah, I was just going to comment that my understanding is that most of the programs in Ontario, like the FIT and the microfit programs, you end up being attached to the grid, and then you sell the electricity back to the supplier. So, it doesn't necessarily mean the city would have to buy solar panels. It could literally be renting the roof out to somebody who owns solar panels, and then getting a percentage of the revenue. I have solar panels on my house. That's how I do it. I don't own those solar panels, but the revenue I get a percentage of the revenue, and then that company is responsible for maintenance. So it may be something where we're just using the area on the roof to reduce our carbon footprint and also generate some money, but we're not taking on increased risk or actually even capital kind of purchases.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Henderson?
I didn't realize they could do that on business. I thought that was just a residential program. And then, you basically rent your roof out to them for 20 years. And then at the end of the 20 years, you own the solar panels. Do they actually do that for businesses too?
There was a program called FIT, which was more for business, and there was a microfit, which was for residential homes.
Mr. Dole.
And the FIT is still going on right now?
Through the chair, there was a program, there's a different program. Again, this is year-old information. So with the revised motion, this allows staff to go back, see if things are still the same. As I said, it was well over a year ago. We'll see what the landscape's like, but we'll look at the notes from that discussion that we had with that one provider. And if by going with an RFP process, if that's the direction we'll go in, we'll look at what others are doing out there in the industry as well.
Okay, thank you. Any other, I don't see any other hands up, so I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed, if any? And that's carried. And so just a motion to adjourn. Moved by Councillor Henderson, seconded by Councillor Subban. All in favor? Opposed, if any? And that's carried. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Council reconvene, and I'll turn it back over to the clerk on our item 15.1.
So through your worship, are there any declarations of pecuniary interest made at standing committee to be restated at the reconvened council portion?
Seeing no hands.
Moving to item 15.2, which is committee reports, and from item 15.2.1 is from the Infrastructure, Transportation and Safety Committee, and that is to approve item 6.1, which related to the Argyle Mackenzie Street reconstruction.
Moved by Councillor Vasilakos, second by Councillor Burbach. Discussion. Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried.
Through your worship, it's my understanding the final item listed on the agenda is the confirmatory bylaw.
Bylaw 11.10, moved by Councillor Sebin and seconded by Councillor Vasilakos. The confirmatory bylaw 11.10 be read a first and second time. Discussion. Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. Third and final reading, Councillor Henderson and Councillor Gaffney for bylaw 11.10, the confirmatory bylaw. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. And a motion to adjourn this afternoon's meeting, Councillor Bunting, Councillor Ingram, moving and seconding. Discussion. If not, all those in favor? Opposed, if any? And that's carried. Thank you.